This powerful Korean drama unfolds with a strong female lead, a legacy built from the ashes of war, and a fight for family and future. Let's dive into the story. We're introduced to a woman of steel, a true force to be reckoned with. She inspects her hotel with a sharp eye, immediately ordering a tasteless painting to be replaced and swapping out oversized portions of food for smaller, more manageable servings to avoid waste. Her strictness isn't about being difficult. It's about upholding the highest quality standards for her guests at the Paradise Hotel. This hotel has a rich history, established 80 years prior amidst the chaos of the Korean War. Back then, a young Ji-soon and her husband were preparing to flee the country, hoping to escape the conflict. But fate had other plans. In the ensuing panic and confusion, Ji-soon was tragically separated from her husband and son, left to face an uncertain future alone. From that day forward, she could only look across the border, yearning for a miracle, hoping for their return. As time marched on, the war eventually ended, leaving a devastated landscape in its wake. Amidst the ruins, Ji-soon started a small restaurant called Paradise, offering warm meals and comfort to fellow displaced people. Her resilience and determination paid off, as her humble restaurant blossomed into a thriving business, eventually evolving into the prestigious hotel chain we see today. At the grand opening ceremony of the latest Paradise Hotel, a sophisticated modern woman bearing a striking resemblance to Ji-soon takes the stage. This is Si-yeon, Ji-soon's granddaughter. Inheriting her grandmother's strength and vision, Si-yeon is driven to fulfill her dream, to transform the Paradise Hotel into a world-renowned destination for travelers from all corners of the globe. Following the hotel inspection, Si-yeon steps outside and is greeted with a warm embrace from her older brother. He congratulates her on achieving this milestone, but a shadow of sadness hangs over Si-yeon. The one person she truly wants to share this triumph with, her beloved grandmother, is battling illness and may not be able to attend the opening ceremony. In the hospital, Ji-soon undergoes a medical examination. Lost in the haze of the procedure, she's transported back to her younger days, desperately searching for her lost husband and son. In a desolate, dreamlike landscape, she calls out their names, but only silence answers. Suddenly, back in the present, elderly Ji-soon cries out and struggles in the machine. Head manager Cheol, a loyal and trusted figure, rushes to her side, comforting her until she calms down. Ji-soon is gripped by a premonition, sensing that her time is drawing near. Back in her hospital room, Ji-soon asks the doctor for the truth, wanting to know how much time she has left. The doctor delivers the heartbreaking news: she has only 3 months to live. Ji-soon receives the news with stoic acceptance, knowing she must prepare for what lies ahead. The following day, the Paradise Hotel's grand opening proceeds. As Si-yeon stands alongside dignitaries, ready to cut the ribbon, a staff member urgently informs her of an unexpected shareholders meeting. Si-yeon immediately suspects the hand of Sung-do, a cunning individual who has long coveted the hotel. With Ji-soon's health failing, Sung-do sees an opportunity to seize control. He's backed by Si-yeon's own brother, the second largest shareholder, who is easily manipulated. Sung-do argues that Ji-soon's decisions can no longer be trusted due to her illness, attempting to install Si-yeon's brother as the new head of the company. As Si-yeon and Sung-do clash, head manager Cheol enters the room, and with him, Ji-soon. Though frail, Ji-soon radiates an undeniable aura of power and authority. Her presence commands the room, silencing the arrogant Sung-do and Si-yeon's brother, who immediately rise. Jo-soon, the queen of her empire, takes her rightful place. The battle for paradise has just begun. Knowing Sung-do's true nature, Ji-soon immediately instructs him to make coffee for everyone, a subtle yet powerful move to establish her dominance and remind everyone in the room that, in her presence, he is nothing more than a coffee boy. This calculated humiliation effectively puts Sung-do in his place. Having asserted her authority, Ji-soon calmly cancels the meeting, making it clear she has no intention of selling the hotel. Her brother, realizing the tide has turned, quickly retreats with Sung-do trailing behind him. As they leave, however, her brother issues a veiled threat, indicating that the plan to sell the hotel is still on, albeit requiring a more covert approach. Determined to protect her legacy and support Si-yeon, Jo-soon decides to leave the hospital, wanting to be involved in navigating this crisis and, more importantly, spend her remaining time with her family. Upon seeing Ji-soon, Se-gyu, another grandchild, quickly puts on his sunglasses and prepares to leave. He prefers to avoid the family drama surrounding the hotel, and was only there to check on his grandmother. Satisfied that she's alright, he departs. Si-yeon, however, remains by Ji-soon's side. Ji-soon takes Si-yeon's hand, expressing her gratitude for helping her achieve her dream of expanding Paradise Hotel across South Korea. With Ji Soon back at the helm, the fate of the hotel remains uncertain, shrouded in mystery. Reporters eagerly follow the unfolding family drama, speculating about the outcome of the inheritance battle. Will Si-yeon, determined to uphold her grandmother's wishes and preserve the hotel, prevail? Or will her brother, driven by greed and holding a significant share of the company, succeed in selling it? After leaving the hospital, Ji Soon makes the difficult decision to discontinue treatment. Returning home, she gazes at the photos adorning her walls, one of which captures a precious moment with her long-lost son, Young-hoon. The story flashes back to 2002, when a historic reunion for separated families took place between North and South Korea. With a mix of anticipation and trepidation, Ji Soon enters the hall, searching for her son. Young-hoon, now a grown man, is there with his son, Moon Seong. The reunion is emotionally charged, filled with tears and the weight of years of separation. Ji Soon, consumed by guilt and a desire to make amends, wants to provide for Young-hoon and his son. She suggests Moon Seong come live with her in South Korea, believing it offers better opportunities for his future. However, her well-intentioned offer is met with resistance from Young-hoon. Having grown up in North Korea, he harbors resentment towards the capitalist South and its values. Despite the joy of reunion, he can't conceal his bitterness. He reveals that his father, Ji Soon's husband, never remarried, clinging to the memory of his lost love until his dying breath, even calling out Ji Soon's name in his final moments. Young-hoon expresses his disappointment, wishing his mother had returned home instead of building a new life in the South. Ji Soon is heartbroken by his words. Her life has been a tapestry of hardship and loss, and now, faced with the rejection of both her son and grandson, she feels the cruel hand of fate. Witnessing his grandmother's sadness, young Moon Seong quietly reaches out and takes her hand, a small gesture of comfort. As the reunion draws to a close, Young-hoon remains distant, viewing his mother as a traitor. Only Moon Seong weeps openly, clinging to his grandmother. Ji Soon promises her grandson that they will meet again in the same place next year, clinging to that hope as the only solace in the face of such a complex and painful reality. The vast distance between them represents the fragile thread of hope that Ji Soon desperately holds on to. Tragically, their reunion was not to be repeated. 20 years passed after that cherished meeting, and they never saw each other again. Ji Soon sits in her home, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. As she relives the memory of holding Moon Seong's hand, the feeling lingers, a poignant reminder of what was and what could have been. If she had one regret, it would be not seeing Moon Seong again. She calculates that he must be around 30 years old now. That evening, head manager Cheol, reflecting on Ji Soon's words and her deep longing to see her grandson, makes a decision. He resolves to help her fulfill this final wish, to find Moon Seong no matter the cost. The next day, head manager Cheol visits a private investigator's office. He had previously tasked the detective with locating Moon Seong. The investigator presents Cheol with a file, requesting additional payment for what has proven to be a challenging assignment. Cheol looks at the photograph in the file, his heart sinking. Moon Seong, it turns out, didn't grow up to be a good man. He's become a ruthless opportunist, frequently crossing the border between China and North Korea, involved in smuggling and working as a hired hand for criminal organizations. He's a man who will do anything for money. A stark contrast to the innocent child Ji Soon remembers. The news of Moon Seong's descent into criminality leaves Cheol in turmoil. If the investigator's findings are accurate, bringing this hardened criminal before Ji Soon would only cause her more pain. However, Ji Soon's desire to see Moon Seong is so strong that she had confided in Cheol, saying that if she could see him again, she would find the strength to live a few more years. Later that evening, Cheol attends a small folk theater. A play about the Korean War is being performed. Remarkably, the lead actor bears a striking resemblance to Ji Soon's missing husband in his youth. Looking at this young performer, an idea sparks in Cheol's mind. After the performance, Cheol approaches the actor, revealing his identity and proposing a daring plan. He asks the actor to participate in a charade, to pretend to be Moon Seong and meet with Ji Soon. The actor, Jae Hyun, hesitates. He's an actor, yes, but he's never engaged in deception of this magnitude. Moreover, impersonating Moon Seong for 3 months would require him to abandon his current acting troupe and his part-time delivery job, jeopardizing his livelihood. Sensing his hesitation, Cheol mentions a figure. 3. Jae Hyun assumes it's 3 million Korean won for 3 months of work. Cheol corrects him. It's 300 million won. The staggering sum leaves Jae Hyun speechless. Meanwhile, in the VIP section of a nightclub, Sigyu is living a life of reckless abandon. He's surrounded by beautiful women, offering them an impromptu trip to France for a romantic getaway. Before they can respond, however, Si-yeon arrives, pretending to be Se-ju's wife, berating him for his constant partying and neglect of his family. Si-ju, caught off guard, is speechless, as one of the women throws a drink in his face. Si-yeon watches her brother's humiliation with amusement. After this playful intervention, the siblings sit down to discuss business. Si-yeon reveals her true motive. She wants to persuade her brother to return to the company and help her protect the Paradise Hotel from being sold. However, Si-yeon's brother, Si-ju, is a free spirit, unbound by responsibility. He relinquished all his shares in the hotel upon reaching adulthood, preferring a life of leisure and extravagance. Now, engrossed in his pursuits, he shows little interest in helping Se-yeon. He even suggests that their eldest brother, Se-jun's, plan to sell the hotel and reap a substantial profit aligns with his carefree philosophy. All he can offer Si-yeon is an apology. Later that afternoon, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, Jim-soon drifts off, her dreams taking her back to the painful separation from her husband and son. She awakens with tears in her eyes, the memories still vivid and raw. The Paradise Hotel represents Jim-soon's enduring hope for family and connection. She envisioned it as a beacon, a landmark that could help those lost and separated find their way back home. Si-jun's intentions, however, are a stark betrayal of this vision. He doesn't understand the deep wounds of war and separation, and while Jim-soon doesn't blame him, she feels a profound sense of helplessness. Meanwhile, after his conversation with head manager Cheol, Jae-hyun finds himself dreaming of a life of luxury. He visits a car dealership where his friend works, picking out a fancy car in anticipation of his newfound wealth. His friend teases him about not being able to afford it, but Jae-hyun remains unfazed, confident in the lucrative opportunity that lies ahead. After work, the two friends head to a bar. They've just bought drinks for two attractive women when a commotion erupts across the room. Si-ju, surrounded by an entourage, is the center of attention, sparking envy in Jae-hyun and his friend. They yearn for the carefree, lavish lifestyle that Si-ju embodies. While Si-ju revels in his extravagance, Si-yeon grapples with the mounting pressure of saving the hotel. Jim-soon will stipulates that her shares be divided equally among her grandchildren. However, after accounting for other assets, Si-jun, the eldest brother, still controls the largest portion. With Si-ju having forfeited his shares, Si-yeon finds herself outmatched, making the sale of the hotel seem increasingly inevitable. Si-yeon's colleagues brainstorm solutions, but nothing seems viable. One of them suggests a far-fetched idea: if Jim-soon's will dictates equal shares for her grandchildren, then perhaps finding a long-lost illegitimate child and securing their alliance could tip the balance in Se-yeon's favor. Si-yeon is taken aback by the suggestion, dismissing it as improbable. How could her parents have had another child? As the hotel continues to operate, Si-yeon and her team strive to improve its services and boost its reputation. However, Song-do remains a persistent nuisance, constantly bringing in hotel assessors to evaluate the property in preparation for the sale. Every encounter with him is a painful reminder of the battle she's facing against her brother. Amidst this tension, a glimmer of hope appears. One of Si-yeon's colleagues delivers good news. The hotel's most expensive suite has been booked for a long-term stay. Overjoyed, Si-yeon personally delivers a welcome amenity to the VIP guest. However, her joy turns to surprise when she recognizes the guest, Dong-ji, her ex-fiancé. Their reunion is strained, the air thick with unresolved issues. Si-yeon, already burdened with the hotel crisis, wants nothing to do with him, adding another layer of complexity to her already challenging situation. Before leaving, Dong-ji delivers a parting shot, suggesting that despite her strong facade, Si-yeon will eventually come crawling back to him. Si-yeon dismisses his words as arrogance, refusing to be drawn into his games. Meanwhile, after a disappointing audition, Jae-hyun finally decides to accept head manager Cheol's offer. He tells Cheol he's not doing it for the money, but to fulfill an old woman's dying wish. This statement creates a moral conflict for Cheol. Here's an actor prioritizing Jim-soon's happiness, while he, her trusted confidant, is orchestrating a deception. Guilt begins to gnaw at him. Jae-hyun, oblivious to Cheol's internal struggle, expresses concern about the increased payment, which has now ballooned to 500 million won. He tries to reassure Cheol, emphasizing that he will only be acting for Cheol's benefit. He's confident he can convince the rest of the family that he's the real Moon Seong without revealing the charade. After some persistent persuasion, Jae-hyun manages to allay Cheol's concerns. The following day, Cheol visits the private investigator, requesting all the information gathered on Moonsong. He hands the investigator a substantial sum of money to ensure his silence about the real Moonsong's identity and whereabouts. Cheol then takes the file and a contract to Jae Hyun, formalizing their agreement. With everything in place, Cheol returns to Jim soon, delivering the joyous news. He has found Moon Seong. He explains that Moon Seong has left North Korea and is living abroad, making his return to South Korea relatively straightforward. Cheol assures her that he's arranging for their reunion. Jim soon is overjoyed, her eyes welling up as she looks at a childhood photo of Moon Seong. She gathers her 3 grandchildren, announcing the imminent arrival of their long-lost cousin from North Korea. Si-jun, the eldest, remains silent, harboring suspicions about Cheol's motives. He wonders if this is a ploy to dilute the shares further, jeopardizing his plans to sell the hotel. Si-ju is equally displeased by the news, sensing ulterior motives, but he too keeps his reservations to himself. Only Si-yeon sees the potential for a positive family reunion. Meanwhile, Jae Hyun delves into the information about Moon Seong, discovering that he had a wife who tragically died in an accident. This detail sparks an idea. He wants to create a more complete and comforting picture for Jim soon. He believes she would find solace in knowing that her grandson not only survived, but also found love and built a family. So, he decides to deviate from the original plan. To make Moon Seong's life seem fuller, Jae Hyun decides to resurrect his deceased wife. He approaches Yoon-hee, a former colleague from his acting troupe, and proposes that she play the role of Moon Seong's wife. For Yoon-hee, who harbors romantic feelings for Jae Hyun, the opportunity to play his wife for 3 months is a temptation greater than money or fame. She readily agrees, embracing the role of Moon Seong's widow. They begin preparing for their roles, getting makeovers and staging photos to document their fabricated life together. The stage is set for a grand deception, one built on good intentions, but fraught with the potential for unforeseen consequences. Head manager Cheol presents Jim soon with the fabricated documents and photos of Moon Seong, convincingly portrayed by Jae Hyun. Jim soon, her heart filled with hope, accepts the information without a shadow of doubt. The day of Jae Hyun's arrival is treated as a grand occasion. Jin soon prepares a feast, and her 3 grandchildren are also present for the momentous reunion. When Cheol's car pulls up to the house, Jae Hyun and Yoon-hee, dressed modestly, approach Jim soon. Overcome with emotion, Jim soon reaches out, her face crumpled with tears, and embraces Jae Hyun. Jae Hyun, however, reacts awkwardly to this outpouring of affection. He pulls away, claiming he's overwhelmed and needs time to adjust. Si-jun and Si-ju observe Jae Hyun with cool detachment, not yet detecting anything amiss. As everyone gathers in the living room for dinner, Jae Hyun and Yoon-hee sit across from the real grandchildren. Recalling Cheol's briefing, Si-jun is cold and suspicious. Si-ju is a playboy with transparent emotions, and Si-yeon, despite her career-driven demeanor, is actually kind-hearted. Jae Hyun and Yoon-hee agree on a strategy. They shouldn't appear too enthusiastic. Rich families, they reason, are often wary of newcomers who might threaten their inheritance. They need to establish from the outset that they aren't interested in the family fortune. Jae Hyun speaks first, declaring that he only returned upon hearing of Jim soon's illness, wanting to fulfill his filial duty. Yoon-hee adds that they intend to leave once Jim soon passes away. Si-yeon, to everyone's astonishment, immediately invites them to stay permanently. Si-jun and Se-ju exchange incredulous looks, while their sister-in-law looks on in horrified silence. Unfazed, Si-yeon, a subtle smile playing on her lips, urges Jae Hyun to consider her offer. During the meal, Jae Hyun sits beside Jim soon, tentatively tasting a spoonful of the soup. He then feigns surprise, devouring the rest of the bowl with gusto, a performance designed to portray someone who grew up in the hardships of North Korea. Jim soon, her heart aching for her grandson's perceived deprivation, immediately refills his bowl. Si-jun, ever suspicious, begins his probing, asking Jae Hyun and Yoon-hee how they managed to escape North Korea. They're prepared for this question. Yoon-hee claims to be of mixed Chinese-Korean descent, possessing a Chinese border resident permit that allowed them to cross. As for escaping with Jae Hyun, she explains that as long as no one reports them, they won't face any trouble. The explanation seems plausible enough, and Si-jun doesn't press further. However, it's not just the brothers who are scrutinizing the newcomers. Jim soon, despite her joy, also inadvertently probes Jae Hyun's memory, asking him what he said to her during their reunion years ago. Jae Hyun, caught off guard by a question he wasn't prepared for, glances nervously at Cheol. He stumbles, claiming he doesn't remember. A shadow of disappointment crosses Jim soon's face, her eyes clouding with uncertainty. Seeing Jim soon's sadness, Jae Hyun improvises, adding a heartfelt detail to his fabricated memory. He says he doesn't recall the exact words, but he vividly remembers holding her hand at the train station. a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through him as he longed to see her again. This spontaneous embellishment hits the mark. Jim-soon's face softens, and she clasps his hand warmly, her doubts seemingly dispelled. That evening, Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee retreat to their room, closing the door behind them. Only then, with head manager Cheol present, do they allow themselves to relax, the tension of their performance momentarily forgotten. Cheol praises their acting and hands Jae-hyun half of the agreed-upon payment. Se-yeon, having not seen her grandmother this happy in a long time, visits her room that night, expressing her genuine welcome to Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee. Jim-soon is delighted by Se-yeon's sincerity, knowing her other grandsons are unlikely to embrace their newfound cousin. She suggests Se-yeon take Jae-hyun on a tour of Seoul, eager for him to experience the vibrant city. Later, Jae-hyun meets with Cheol, discussing his improvised story at the dinner table. He reflects that Jim-soon likely believed him, because of the genuine emotion he channeled into the story. As a child, Jae-hyun was abandoned by his mother, left alone and frightened in a crowded amusement park. He realizes that this childhood experience resonated with the emotions Moonsong might have felt during his separation from his grandmother. At bedtime, Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee encounter an awkward situation. Despite their convincing performance, they are, after all, only pretending to be a married couple. Jae-hyun, feeling uncomfortable sharing a bed, tries to sleep on the sofa. Yoon-hee quickly stops him, pointing out that the housekeeper might become suspicious. She pulls back the covers, inviting him to lie beside her. Yoon-hee has her own agenda. The money is secondary. Her real goal is to get closer to Jae-hyun. The next day, Se-yeon takes Jae-hyun on a tour of Seoul. While he anticipated this, he's still surprised by her enthusiasm. Cheol had explained that Se-yeon needs an ally in her fight against her brother, and Jae-hyun's arrival is opportune. She needs to win him over to her side. As they explore the city, Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee face the challenge of maintaining their North Korean facade. North Korea, being a closed society, information about life there is scarce. They realize there are no right answers, they simply have to improvise. There are a few slip-ups. At a cafe, Jae-hyun inadvertently orders an iced Americano. Se-yeon raises an eyebrow, asking if they have such drinks in North Korea. Jae-hyun, realizing his mistake, laughs it off awkwardly. As night falls, Se-yeon and Jae-hyun sit on a street bench after dinner. Se-yeon reveals her predicament, hoping to enlist Jae-hyun's support in preventing her brother from selling their grandmother's hotel. Meanwhile, Yoon-hee, staying at the house as per the traditional North Korean custom of women maintaining a low profile, offers to help the housekeeper in the kitchen. The housekeeper compliments Yoon-hee on her delicate hands, remarking that Jae-hyun must treat her well, as she'd heard North Korean women endure harsh labor. Yoon-hee, startled by this observation, quickly withdraws her hands. Another close call in their elaborate charade. Yoon-hee quickly notices her sister-in-law, Se-jun's wife, on the sofa making a phone call. Head manager Cheol had warned them about her, describing her, like Se-jun, as unpredictable and someone to be avoided. He had advised them to steer clear of the eldest brother and his wife. However, Yoon-hee sees an opportunity. She overhears Se-jun's wife discussing a vintage-themed party she plans to attend, and an idea begins to form. Later that evening, Cheol meets with Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee as usual, inquiring about their day and any potential missteps. Both recall their respective blunders, the iced Americano and the comment about Yoon-hee's hands, and a sense of unease settles over them. Cheol, ever the pragmatist, reminds them of the substantial sum they're being paid, and the importance of maintaining their charade flawlessly. The next day, Se-yeon arrives at work to learn that an investment firm has acquired a 4% stake in the hotel, becoming a significant shareholder. Seeing an opportunity to gain an ally, she immediately contacts the firm. To her surprise, the representative on the other end of the line is none other than Dong-ji. Se-yeon meets with Dong-jae, offering to buy back his shares and asking for his price. Dong-ji, however, isn't interested in money. He wants Se-yeon. She reiterates that they are on different paths, comparing his ruthless ambition to that of her brother, Se-jun. She leaves, and Dong-ji watches her go, realizing that winning her over will be a long game. The next morning, under a bright and scorching sun, Jae-hyun sits with Jim-soon in the garden. She shares the story of how she came to establish the Paradise Hotel. After remarrying, she ran a small restaurant in South Korea. One day, a young traveler asked for a place to sleep. Jim-soon, sympathetic to his plight, offered him a room. The next morning, he was gone, leaving behind a substantial sum of money, enough to pay for 30 bowls of soup. This act of kindness inspired her to open a hotel, a place of refuge for weary travelers. Jae-hyun expresses his admiration, not just for her good fortune, but for her courage and resilience. While they share this heartwarming moment, the real Moon Seong continues his precarious existence, working for ruthless gangsters, living in squalor, and eating cheap food. His only solace is the thought of his grandmother. He checks his phone, searching for news about Soon, clinging to the hope of one day reuniting with her. That morning, Si-yeon plans to take Jae-hyun on a tour of the hotel. Jae-hyun dresses impeccably for the occasion, while Yoon-hee opts to stay home, fearing she might be recognized. Her parents, she claims, are on the hotel's advisory board. As Jae-hyun arrives at the hotel, he's awestruck by its grandeur, a world away from his own humble life. Unbeknownst to him, a woman passing by notices him, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She appears to know him. Jae-hyun, engrossed in conversation with Si-yeon, remains oblivious to this encounter, his enthusiasm for the hotel growing with every step he takes. The elaborate web of deception continues to spin, with the potential for unraveling at any moment. Their tour is interrupted by Dong-ji, who confronts Jae-hyun, introducing himself as Si-yeon's fiancé. Jae-hyun, maintaining his North Korean persona, sternly questions Dong-ji's lack of formal language, especially upon first meeting. Dong-ji, realizing he's facing Soon's grandson from the north, quickly recovers, explaining that he was trying to be friendly by dropping the honorifics. Jae-hyun, unmoved, continues to criticize his impoliteness, then pulls Si-yeon away, leaving a bewildered Dong-ji behind. He notes that he's never seen Si-yeon so relaxed and at ease. Si-yeon takes Jae-hyun to a cafe. He accidentally knocks over his coffee cup, and Si-yeon immediately starts to clean up the mess. Jae-hyun, surprised by her reaction, stops her, insisting on cleaning it up himself. After the minor mishap, he observes that Si-yeon is clearly caring towards others, but neglects herself. He assures her that as her new little brother, he will always look out for her. That evening, back at the house, Jae-hyun excitedly pulls out a new phone, a gift from head manager Cheol, and asks for Si-yeon's number. She laughs and enters it, and he immediately runs off to call her, like a child with a new toy. Si-yeon uses this opportunity to invite Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee for a round of golf the following day, suggesting it's a good way to network with business associates. Jae-hyun, charmed by her friendly gesture, agrees without hesitation. Back in their room, he and Yoon-hee discuss the invitation, a sense of panic rising between them. Jae-hyun's problem isn't socializing. It's that he's an excellent golfer. Pretending to be a novice is far more challenging than pretending to be proficient. Yoon-hee shares his predicament. She too is a skilled golfer. The room fills with a nervous energy. To avoid being exposed, Yoon-hee tries to come up with excuses to decline, but Si-yeon, ever thoughtful, sends over golf attire and invites them to the living room for a practice session on a golf simulator. They're trapped, with no choice but to go through with it. In the living room, Si-yeon provides enthusiastic guidance, while Si-gyu watches from a distance, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Si-jun had previously voiced his doubts about Jae-hyun's true identity, and although Se-gyu has distanced himself from family affairs, he feels a sense of duty to protect his family. He decides to test Jae-hyun himself. Late that night, Se-gyu slips into Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee's room, only to be startled by Jae-hyun. Se-gyu recovers quickly, suggesting they experience Seoul's nightlife as a welcome gesture. At a bar, Se-gyu engages Jae-hyun in casual conversation, claiming that he and Se-jun bear no ill will towards him. All they need is proof of his identity. He proposes a DNA test, assuring Jae-hyun it would put everyone's minds at ease. The suggestion sends a wave of panic through Jae-hyun. As Se-gyu reaches out to pluck a hair from Jae-hyun for the DNA test, Jae-hyun pushes him away forcefully. He declares that he came to South Korea solely to spend time with his ailing grandmother, harboring no ulterior motives. He refuses to tolerate the baseless suspicions of Se-jun and Se-gyu. Amid their scuffle, a woman approaches, calling out Se-gyu's name. This time, it's Se-gyu who is caught off guard. He doesn't recognize her. The woman, realizing she's been forgotten, flies into a rage, grabbing his hair. Jae-hyun tries to intervene, but the situation escalates into a chaotic hair-pulling brawl. Humiliated, Se-gyu and Jae-hyun flee the bar and hide in an empty room. As they catch their breath, Se-gyu talks about his extravagant and hedonistic lifestyle, his belief in instant gratification. He argues that no one knows what tomorrow holds, so it's best to enjoy life to the fullest. He believes that if death renders everything meaningless, then life itself is pointless. Jae-hyun counters, arguing that if everything ends in death and is therefore meaningless, that makes life even more precious. He explains his motivations, emphasizing his simple desire to see his grandmother, to avoid future regrets. He then plucks a few strands of his hair and offers them to Si-Yu for the DNA test. The following day, Jae-hyun recounts the incident to head manager Cheol, who is stunned. Jae-hyun explains his reasoning. The more suspicious they are, the more forthright he needs to appear. He predicts that if Si-Ju were to actually use the hair for a DNA test, the truth would be revealed. Si-Ju, easily swayed by emotion, is moved by Jae-hyun's apparent sincerity. His suspicions allayed, he abandons his investigation, handing the hair sample over to Sejun. Unbeknownst to them, the hair Jae-hyun provided actually belongs to Si-Ju, snatched during their earlier brawl. Regardless of the test results, Jae-hyun is safe. Soon after, Sejun receives the DNA results, confirming a familial relationship between Jae-hyun and Ji-Soon. Later that day, as Jae-hyun enjoys tea with his grandmother, Si-yeon calls, inviting him to the hotel. Si-yeon has planned a multi-day trip, wanting to take Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee on a tour of 8 provinces in South Korea. Jae-hyun, however, realizes that they shouldn't overextend their interaction with Si-yeon, nor can they continue to be swayed by her generosity. He politely declines, expressing his desire to travel alone with his wife. Si-yeon doesn't press the issue. Back at the villa, Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee inform Ji-Soon of their travel plans. She readily agrees, even providing them with spending money. Their first act in this elaborate play has come to a temporary close, and they can finally step off the stage and breathe. They return to their apartment. Jae-hyun withdraws all the money from his payment card, relishing the tangible weight of his earnings. The next day, he visits the car dealership and purchases the car he'd been admiring. That night, he treats his friends to a lavish celebration at a VIP bar, surrounded by beautiful women. Unbeknownst to him, Si-Yu is in the next room. Having heard rumors of someone outspending him, Si-Yu, his pride stung, wants to see who dares to challenge his extravagance. The stage is set for another encounter, another twist in this increasingly complex charade. Luckily for Jae-hyun, he's quick-witted. He manages to slip away unnoticed before Si-Yu sees him, leaving only his oblivious friends behind. Si-Yu, determined to assert his dominance, orders an even more extravagant round of drinks and entertainment. The women in Jae-hyun's the 6th room, hearing rumors of a bigger spender, abandon him for Si-Yu. Jae-hyun, no longer in the mood to celebrate, returns home in a daze. He wakes the next morning with a pang of regret, staring at his dwindling funds. Determined to curb his spending, he deposits the remaining money back into his account. That afternoon, Yoon-hee approaches him with a practical problem. They had told Ji-Soon they were touring South Korea, which means they need souvenirs and photos as proof. Lacking the time for an actual trip, Jae-hyun devises a resourceful solution. He finds large backdrops depicting various tourist destinations, like beaches and forests, and stages photos with Yoon-hee in front of them. Just then, Si-yeon calls, asking about their return. Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee fumble through a response, realizing it's time to return to their roles and continue the performance. During Jae-hyun's absence, Ji-Soon experiences a profound sense of loneliness. One night, she dreams of her past, of running her soup restaurant. Suddenly, she sees her deceased husband standing in the distance, gazing at her. They embrace, and he assures her that nothing will ever separate them again. Beyond the dream, Ji-Soon's health begins to deteriorate. She awakens from the dream in pain. Si-yeon, sensing something is wrong, rushes to her grandmother's room, only to find it empty. Bloodstains in the sink and scattered pills paint a grim picture. Frantic, Si-yeon searches the house, finally finding Ji-Soon outside in the courtyard. Relieved, she embraces her grandmother tightly. The next day, Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee return, feigning the exhaustion of weary travelers. They're immediately greeted by Sejun. He's neither warm nor cold, engaging in perfunctory small talk. Only as he walks away does a flicker of suspicion cross his face. Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee sense something amiss, but their immediate priority is seeing Ji-Soon. They rush to her room, embracing her warmly. Jae-hyun presents her with a framed photo of himself and Yoon-hee, a souvenir from their trip. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Sejun is actively investigating Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee. He pulls their records through various channels, but finds nothing out of the ordinary. Head manager Cheol's meticulous planning has paid off. Sejun, however, begins to consider other possibilities. With the DNA test and background checks yielding nothing suspicious, Jae-hyun is likely to inherit a portion of the estate. If he aligns himself with Si-yeon, Sejun's chances of winning the inheritance battle decrease significantly. Later that day, Jae-hyun goes shopping for ingredients, intending to make dumplings for the family. As he and Yoon-hee work in the kitchen, Sejun appears, unexpectedly speaking to Jae-hyun in Mandarin. recalling their fabricated story about living near the Chinese border. Jae Hyun freezes, offering a sheepish grin as he pretends not to understand Mandarin. Just then, Yoon-hee steps in, speaking fluent Mandarin and smoothly explaining that while Jae Hyun grew up in North Korea and can understand some Mandarin, he can't speak it. The explanation is perfectly plausible, and Sejun drops the subject. Dinner is served, and Ji-Soon, after a single bite, is overcome with emotion. The familiar flavors evoke a deep sense of nostalgia for her homeland. After the meal, she announces her intention to give Jae Hyun a chance to prove himself. But before he can react, she clarifies. She wants him to learn the hotel business. This announcement sends shockwaves through the room. Sejun is instantly wary, while Seju openly expresses his displeasure. Jong-soon, however, remains firm. As chairwoman, she argues, it's her prerogative to involve family in the business. Only Si-yeon understands her grandmother's true motive, to empower her in the face of Sejun's hostility, providing her with an ally in Jae Hyun. Jae Hyun hesitates, but with everyone watching, he agrees. Back in their room, he and Yoon-hee discuss this unexpected development with head manager Cheol. Managing a hotel is a new stage, one they're completely unprepared for. Yoon-hee, ever resourceful, suggests that as long as Jae Hyun avoids any prominent position, they should be safe. The hotel, with its bustling staff and constant activity, offers ample opportunity to blend in. The following day, Jae Hyun accompanies Si-yeon to the hotel. She intends to place him in the planning department where she works. Sung-do, Sejun's right-hand man, intervenes, objecting that placing the chairman's grandson directly into a crucial department is unfair to other employees. Jae Hyun, surprisingly, isn't offended. He calmly asks Sung-do what position he recommends. Sung-do, with a thinly veiled smirk, suggests the bellhop department, given Jae Hyun's limited experience. Remembering Yoon-hee's advice, Jae Hyun enthusiastically accepts, declaring his intention to be the best bellhop the hotel has ever seen. Sung-do, taken aback by his cheerful acceptance, leaves with a puzzled expression. Jae Hyun turns to reassure Si-yeon, but she looks dejected. She sees him as a naive newcomer being bullied by her brother and Sung-do, and she feels powerless to help. Despite not joining the planning department, Jae Hyun joins Si-yeon and her colleagues for an after-work dinner. They take an immediate liking to him, sharing drinks and laughter. By the end of the evening, Jae Hyun is thoroughly intoxicated. Si-yeon helps him back to the villa. In his drunken state, he suddenly confesses his feelings for her. Si-yeon is startled, but Jae Hyun, still somewhat coherent, quickly clarifies, adding that he loves her, Ji-soon, and everything about their family. Si-yeon chuckles and helps Jae Hyun back to the villa. Most of the lights are off, the household is asleep. Yoon-hee, emerging from her room, sees Si-yeon supporting a drunken Jae Hyun. A pang of jealousy shoots through her. Her face tightens as she pulls Jae Hyun away from Si-yeon, scolding her for letting her husband get so drunk on his first day of work, forcing her to wait up all night. After Jae Hyun is asleep, Yoon-hee gazes at his sleeping face, unable to resist gently stroking his cheek. She doesn't understand her feelings for him, but she knows they're there, strong and undeniable. Sometimes, she muses, there's no need for a reason, you simply fall for someone. The next morning, Ji-soon bustles around the kitchen. Hearing about Jae Hyun's drunken escapade, she puts on a stern face, causing him to wake up with a look of panic. She quickly softens, however, her mock anger replaced with a playful tease. Unbeknownst to him, the simple act of waiting for a loved one to come home is a luxury she hasn't experienced in decades. It's Jae Hyun's first day as a bellhop. Dressed in his uniform, he diligently attends to his duties. Dong-ji arrives at the hotel and, spotting Jae Hyun, deliberately summons him to carry his luggage. Jae Hyun obliges. In his room, Dong-ji asks Jae Hyun to try on a new shirt he's purchased. Jae Hyun questions his motives. Dong-ji reveals his intention to marry Si-yeon, suggesting he's trying to build a rapport with Jae Hyun as a future family member. Jae Hyun, however, senses something else. A condescending arrogance, as if Dong-ji is offering him charity. Seeing that his friendly overtures aren't working, Dong-ji gets straight to the point. He proposes that Jae Hyun sell him any shares he inherits in the hotel. Acquiring those shares, he believes, will give him leverage to persuade Si-yeon to marry him. Jae Hyun is disgusted by his blatant ambition, and scolds him before leaving with the luggage cart. Back in the lobby, Sung-do confronts Jae Hyun, accusing him of a fabricated mistake and ordering him to remove his uniform and report to the laundry room. Si-yeon watches the scene unfold from a distance, her face impassive. Only after Jae Hyun leaves does she approach Sung-do, warning him to back off. She reminds him that if Jae Hyun inherits shares and allies with her, Sung-do will lose his position in the hotel. While Jae-hyun endures his trials at the hotel, Yoon-hee puts her own plan into motion. She approaches her sister-in-law, offering to help her prepare for the vintage party. Sejun's wife is delighted, taking her to a second-hand clothing market. However, when Yoon-hee arrives at the party in her dowdy outfit, she's met with a group of impeccably dressed socialites. They mock Sejun's wife for her frumpy attire, reminding her that while the theme is vintage, it's still important to look stylish. They speak to her in English, despite being Korean, their tone dripping with condescension. He observes the dynamics, understanding her sister-in-law's marginalized position within this social circle. Seeing her discomfort, Yoon-hee steps in, using her supposed North Korean background as a shield. She loudly criticizes the socialites for their lack of manners, pointing out their pretentious use of English despite being Korean. Having delivered her pointed remarks, Yoon-hee whisks her sister-in-law away from the party. In the car, she comforts her, saying that someone as refined as she shouldn't associate with such shallow women. She encourages her to express her pent-up anger. Emboldened by Yoon-hee's support, Sejun's wife returns to confront the socialites, delivering a scathing rebuke before leaving with Yoon-hee. They stop at a small restaurant. Yoon-hee seizes the opportunity to exchange phone numbers, solidifying their newfound bond. During the meal, Yoon-hee excuses herself to make a call. The socialite who had insulted Sejun's wife had claimed to be a Harvard Law student, but Yoon-hee, a real Harvard Law graduate, doesn't recognize her. She asks a friend to investigate the woman's background. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun's first day of work sees him demoted from bellhop to laundry duty. Despite the menial tasks, he adapts quickly. On their way home, he asks Se-yeon about her breakup with Dong-jae. She avoids the question, stating firmly that she will never get back together with him. A speeding car nearly hits them, and Jae-hyun angrily yells at the driver, a display of protectiveness that makes Se-yeon laugh. Back at the villa, Se-yeon tells head manager Cheol that she's grown fond of Jae-hyun and wants to ensure he stays in South Korea. Cheol, however, cautions her against developing genuine feelings, reminding her that Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee are only temporary guests, destined to leave after Jim soon passes away. The next day, Jae-hyun is hard at work in the laundry room when two old friends appear. They greet him by name, but just then, Se-yeon walks in. Thinking fast, Jae-hyun switches to his North Korean persona, addressing his friends as comrades, who also escaped from the north. Se-yeon, delighted to see him making friends, gives him her credit card and encourages them to go out together. After work, the three friends gather at a burger joint. Jae-hyun has no choice but to reveal the truth about his charade. His friends are incredulous, then intrigued, and finally eager to get in on the action. Back at the villa, Yoon-hee paces anxiously in the living room. After Jae-hyun's drunken return the previous night, she's now worried about his late arrival from work. Her visible frustration amuses the housekeeper and Sejun's wife. Later that night, Yoon-hee sleeps on the sofa, waiting for Jae-hyun. He wakes her, excitedly sharing a piece of news that leaves them both buzzing with anticipation. The next day, Se-yeon confronts Sejun, accusing him of orchestrating Sung-do's harassment of Jae-hyun. Sejun denies any involvement, advising Se-yeon not to put all her eggs in one basket. He argues that even with her support, there's no guarantee Jae-hyun will side with her in the inheritance battle. He suggests aligning with Dong-ji instead, a more pragmatic approach. Se-yeon is left speechless. Her brother's logic is undeniable. Jae-hyun remains an unknown quantity, while Dong-ji's intentions are clear. Marrying him would give her the leverage she needs to defeat Sejun. She's torn between loyalty to her newfound cousin and the strategic advantage Dong-ji offers. Troubled by her brother's words, Se-yeon heads to Dong-ji's suite. Just before knocking, she hesitates, turning to leave. But it's too late. Dong-ji has already seen her. He invites her in and then summons Jae-hyun to his room. At that moment, Jae-hyun is catching up with his theater friends and Yoon-hee in the laundry room. Bored at the villa, Yoon-hee had used the pretext of visiting her husband at work. Unfortunately, her mother, lawyer Seo, is also at the hotel, meeting with Sejun. Lawyer Seo catches a glimpse of Yoon-hee's back, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. When Jae-hyun arrives at Dong-ji's suite, Dong-ji arrogantly proposes dinner for the three of them. Se-yeon, worried that Dong-ji might try to manipulate Jae-hyun, tries to decline. Jae-hyun, however, accepts, mentioning that his wife is also at the hotel, and suggesting they all dine together. Dong-ji readily agrees. That evening, the four of them enjoyed a lavish dinner in Dong-ji's suite, prepared by a renowned chef. Jae-hyun, however, behaves strangely, constantly needling Dong-jae. Calling him shallow and suggesting his relationship with Se-yeon, is purely strategic. His pointed remarks irritate Dong-ji. After dinner, as Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee leave the hotel, Yoon-hee expresses her anger. She doesn't understand Jae-hyun's hostility towards Dong-jae, criticizing his unprofessional behavior. Jae-hyun stammers, unable to offer a coherent explanation. Back at the villa, Yoon-hee banishes Jae-hyun from their room, refusing to let him in until she's asleep. He sits dejectedly in the garden. Si-yeon joins him, and he confesses his predicament, still bewildered by Yoon-hee's anger. Inside, Yoon-hee scribbles in her notebook, lamenting Jae-hyun's obliviousness to her feelings. Under the moonlight, Jae-hyun asks Si-yeon if she loves Dong-ji. She doesn't answer, instead asking him if he loves Yoon-hee. He hesitates, then quickly affirms his love for her, claiming they married for love. Si-yeon sighs, envying their seemingly uncomplicated relationship. Born into wealth, she's always felt constrained by expectations and obligations. Her feelings have become secondary, even in matters of love and marriage. She's expected to marry someone who can advance her career, not someone she genuinely loves. Jae-hyun, unable to grasp the complexities of her situation, simply tells her she shouldn't force herself. She laughs sadly, knowing he can't possibly understand her predicament. The following day, Ji-soon sits in her room, reading. Si-ju enters with a plate of fruit, expressing his wish that she could live for another 10 years, long enough to see him get married and have children. Ji-soon cherishes this grandson, who, despite his outward indifference, possesses a deep love for his family. She knows that after her death, the battle between Se-jun and Se-yeon will intensify. Only Se-gyu, she believes, can mediate between them. Si-ju, however, can't bear to think about such a bleak future. He's afraid of losing his grandmother, afraid of the inevitable fracturing of their family. The weight of this unspoken fear hangs heavy in the air. The following day, Si-yeon takes Jae-hyun to a beautiful seaside cottage, her private art studio. It's her sanctuary, a place where she escapes the pressures of work and finds solace in painting. Jae-hyun admires her artwork, wondering why she didn't pursue a career as an artist. She explains that she feels obligated to carry on her grandmother's legacy and manage the hotel, unable to abandon her responsibilities for her passion. He picks up a photo album, flipping through pictures of Se-yeon's deceased parents. It's revealed that after Ji-soon remarried, her second husband also had a child from a previous relationship, meaning Si-yeon and her siblings aren't actually blood related to Ji-soon. Si-yeon's parents also ran a hotel, but their lives were tragically cut short in a plane crash. Si-yeon explains that her brother has resented the hotel ever since, blaming Ji-soon's ambition for their parents' deaths. They were on a business trip, expanding the hotel chain, when the accident occurred. He knows that Ji-soon's primary motivation for building the hotel empire was to find her lost family in North Korea, but he sees that dream as the cause of his parents' demise. He wants to sell the hotel to force Ji-soon to confront the cost of her ambition. As they leave the cottage, Jae-hyun offers to drive, boasting about his experience driving military tanks in North Korea. Si-yeon takes the passenger seat, but their journey is interrupted by a traffic stop. Jae-hyun panics, then quickly concocts a plan. He tells Si-yeon to stay silent and let him handle the situation, pretending he doesn't have a South Korean driver's license. The officer asks for his license. Jae-hyun steps out of the car, writes his real name on a piece of paper, and asks the officer to check for that license, confident it won't exist in their system. His audacious bluff works, and the bewildered officer lets them go. Back in the car, Jae-hyun speeds off, leaving a stunned Se-yeon behind. She can't fathom how he managed to get out of the situation, and he, still reveling in his successful performance, can't reveal the truth. That night, Jae-hyun returns home late again. Yoon-hee is in bed, feigning sleep. Jae-hyun's mind is racing, filled with images of Si-yeon. He longs for solitude, yet he can't shake her presence from his thoughts. Meanwhile, at the Chinese border, the real Moon Song continues his dangerous existence, performing tasks for a ruthless gangster in exchange for a Chinese passport and the funds to travel to South Korea. He's haunted by memories of his childhood, of shaking his dying father's body on a beach. He wakes from the nightmare, his resolve hardening. He will reach South Korea and his grandmother, no matter the cost. He carries his father's dying message, a secret he needs to share with Ji-soon. The next day, Jae-hyun accompanies Ji-soon to the beach, gazing across the water towards the distant shores of North Korea. Ji-soon used to stand there, yearning for the day her husband and son would cross the border and return to her. The weight of her longing hangs heavy in the air, a silent testament to the enduring pain of separation. Ji-soon, however, feels no regret that her original wish didn't come true. Her beloved grandson has returned, and that's all that matters. Back at the villa, She meticulously handwrites invitations for a special occasion, a farewell party, the last she intends to host in her lifetime. She instructs head manager Cheol to produce a limited number of invitations and distribute them among her family members, each of whom can invite 10 important guests. Sejun begins distributing his invitations, one of which reaches Yoonhee's mother, lawyer Seo. Among Seyeon's invitations is one for her close friend, Hyo Jin, the woman who had noticed Jae Hyun at the hotel. It turns out she and Jae Hyun have a past connection. Seyeon also invites Dong Ji. On the day of the party, as Jae Hyun and Yoonhee arrive, they spot lawyer Seo and Hyo Jin. They try to avoid their acquaintances, but Seyeon, eager to introduce her cousin from the north, approaches Hyo Jin warmly. Meanwhile, lawyer Seo, after greeting other guests, begins walking towards Yoonhee. Both women are filled with a rising sense of panic. As Seyeon is about to introduce Hyo Jin to Jae Hyun and Yoonhee, they frantically signal to head manager Cheol for help. Understanding their predicament, he quickly ushers them towards the medical room. This creates a momentary stir, but the crisis is averted. Once they're alone, Jae Hyun explains to Cheol the danger he faced in the main hall, having encountered people who know his real identity. Cheol calls in Jeom, Soon's personal physician, to examine Jae Hyun, but the experienced doctor immediately recognizes that Jae Hyun is faking. Confronted by the doctor's astute observation, Cheol confesses the entire charade. Now, the doctor is also complicit in the deception. He agrees to help, preventing Jae Hyun from returning to the main hall and risking exposure. Having treated Jeom Soon for many years, he understands her deep longing to see her grandson, and hopes this fabricated reunion will bring her peace. He too wants to extend her happiness, even if it's based on a lie. The doctor informs Jeom Soon that Jae Hyun, overwhelmed by the grandeur of the occasion and the emotional weight of the reunion, has fainted from stress. He assures her that Jae Hyun simply needs rest and quiet. This provides a plausible excuse for Jae Hyun and Yoonhee to remain hidden in the medical room throughout the party. With all the guests assembled, Jeom Soon takes the stage. She announces that the party is her farewell, a celebration of her life and impending death. Despite the somber topic, her face radiates peace. She declares that at 90 years old, with her health and mind still intact, she considers herself fortunate. Moreover, she has fulfilled her lifelong dream of finding her grandson. She asks her friends and family to celebrate her life with joy, not sorrow, and to send her off with smiles, not tears. Jeom Soon's speech is met with warm applause. As she steps down from the podium, she begins to mingle with her guests. She approaches the table where Sejun's guests are seated, noting that he's invited only business associates, lawyers like SEO, and representatives from the firm interested in buying the hotel. After exchanging polite greetings, she quietly asks her eldest grandson if he has any real friends, those unconnected to business dealings. Sejun is speechless, unable to answer. Next, she visits Seju's table, where he's surrounded by his childhood friends. They greet her enthusiastically, and she's delighted to see that their bonds remain strong after all these years. She even remembers their names, a testament to her genuine affection for her grandson and his circle. Finally, she reaches Seyeon's table, where her friends and colleagues are gathered, along with Dong Ji. He immediately seizes the opportunity to reiterate his marriage proposal to Seyeon, who promptly shuts him down. Jeom Soon, though slightly bewildered by their contrasting reactions, respects Seyeon's decision. She makes it clear that she will support Seyeon, whether she chooses to marry or not, and whether her choice is Dongji or someone else. Having attended to her guests, Jeom Soon remembers Jae Hyun. She goes to the medical room, gently waking him. He'd fallen asleep, dreaming of his abandonment as a child, and woke with a start. Jeom Soon, filled with guilt over his supposed collapse, takes his hand, repeatedly thanking him for returning to her. Her genuine emotion touches both Jae Hyun and Yoonhee. Later that night, as head manager Cheol drives them home, he stops at a deserted park, praising their skillful handling of the day's near disasters. He assures them there won't be any more parties like this, urging them to relax. Jae Hyun, however, expresses his desire to end the charade. Jeom Soon's outpouring of affection has stirred his conscience. He questions whether their deception is truly bringing her happiness. Cheol argues that having observed Jeom Soon her entire life, he knows she's always maintained a strong, unyielding facade, both as a woman and a businesswoman. But since Jae Hyun's arrival, she's allowed herself to be vulnerable. This return to her true self, Cheol believes, is the greatest happiness she could achieve. Jae Hyun relents, promising to maintain the charade and ensure Jeom Soon's continued happiness for as long as he plays the role of her grandson. The next day, Jae Hyun suggests Seyeon take Jim-soon to the beach, the same spot where she used to long for the return of her husband and son. Jom-soon is puzzled by the request, as the beach holds painful memories for her. Suddenly, a small fishing boat approaches. Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee stand at the bow, waving enthusiastically to Jim-soon, creating the illusion of having crossed the sea from North Korea to visit her. A beautiful, albeit fabricated, moment of reunion unfolds. Jim-soon realizes Jae-hyun orchestrated the scene to fulfill her longing for a reunion with her family. Overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, she embraces him tightly. His thoughtful gesture touches her deeply. Back at the villa, Jim-soon's happiness lingers. She spontaneously calls her lawyer, summoning him to the house. In front of her family, she updates her will, officially including Jae-hyun as a legal heir. This announcement sends ripples of unease through the room. Si-jun, Si-yeon, and even Jae-hyun recognize the implications. The battle for control of the hotel has officially begun. The next day, Si-jun wastes no time in contacting Dong-jae, offering to buy back the hotel shares at a premium. However, everyone knows Dong-jae's true objective is Si-yeon, and his leverage is the very shares Si-jun wants to acquire. Si-jun then visits Dong-jae personally, urging him to abandon his pursuit of Se-yeon. Dong-jae refuses, countering with a proposal of his own. Se-jun should abandon his plans to sell the hotel. The meeting ends in a stalemate. While Se-jun stews, Si-yeon feels a surge of confidence. Jae-hyun's inclusion in the will has weakened her brother's position. She quickly moves to consolidate her power, reaching out to other shareholders and securing their support. Her efforts seem promising. Si-jun, growing increasingly anxious about Se-yeon's success, instructs Seung-do to remove Se-yeon's assistant, a trusted colleague, from the company. The next day, Si-yeon's colleague receives a transfer notice, reassigning her to a branch on Jeju Island. Si-yeon recognizes her brother's hand in this, but she remains defiant. She will not be intimidated by his tactics. Meanwhile, the real Moon Seong stands on the shores of North Korea, gazing across the water towards a South Korea he's never known. He's haunted by memories of his father's death, which occurred shortly after their reunion with Jim-soon. In his final moments, his father had crawled to this beach, the closest point to his lost love, weeping with regret for not expressing his feelings more openly, and for leaving Moonsong to grow up alone. Back in the present, Moonsong meets with a man who facilitates border crossings. The man offers his services, but Moonsong, though ready to leave, still lacks the necessary documentation to prove his identity. That night at a casino, Moonsong loses all his chips to a man who, instead of taking his money, wants to talk. The man is the private investigator Cheol hired to locate Moonseong. Driven by curiosity, he wants to know who Moonseong really is. The following day, Jae-hyun is at the hotel, working part-time as a portrait artist for Si-yeon's latest event. As he's sketching a guest, Hyo-jin, the woman who had hired him in the past, walks in. She recognizes him instantly, calling out his real name and greeting him warmly. His carefully constructed facade is about to crumble. Hyo-jin invites Jae-hyun for coffee. He initially declines, citing his work, but when she threatens to call Si-yeon, he panics and agrees. At the cafe, Hyo-jin's conversation is filled with thinly veiled romantic interest and admiration for his acting career. Jae-hyun offers polite thanks. Then, noticing the time, excuses himself and rushes back to his portrait station. Si-yeon is indeed checking on him, and he quickly explains that he just took a bathroom break. She doesn't question him further, but juggling both his real identity and his fabricated one is taking its toll. That evening, Si-gyu invites Jae-hyun for a drink. He's created a cozy atmosphere with mood lighting, clearly wanting to have a heart-to-heart. Jae-hyun takes a sip of the expensive liquor Se-gyu offers, impressed by its quality. Si-gyu casually mentions that enjoying such luxuries will become commonplace for Jae-hyun. Once he inherits a portion of Jim-soon's estate, Jae-hyun sobers instantly, his smile fading. He reiterates his lack of interest in the inheritance, emphasizing his desire to simply be with Jim-soon during her final days. Si-gyu points out that if Jim-soon insists on including him in her will, the inheritance will be his regardless of his wishes. Jae-hyun knows that accepting the inheritance would only complicate his life, as he's merely an actor playing a role. After parting ways with Si-gyu, Jae-hyun continues to drink until Si-yeon joins him. She knows her brother sought him out, correctly assuming it was about the inheritance. Jae-hyun confirms her suspicions, again stating his disinterest. Si-yeon seems frustrated. From her perspective, accepting the inheritance would be in his best interest. Back in his room, Jae-hyun reflects on his conversation with Se-gyu. He realizes Si-gyu wants him to stay and act as a buffer against Se-jun, protecting Se-yeon from their brother's machinations. While Jae-hyun doesn't want the inheritance, Se-ju's plea, coupled with his growing feelings for Se-yeon, creates a conflict within him. Elsewhere, the private investigator has located Moon-song at the Chinese border. Moon-song questions him about his identity and head manager Cheol's motives. Why did Cheol pay a large sum to find him, only to abruptly abandon the search and pay an even larger sum for his silence? The investigator's instincts tell him there's a bigger story here. Moon-song reveals a picture of Ji-soon on his phone, identifying her as his grandmother. The investigator is stunned, then remembers Cheol obtaining a fake passport for Jae-hyun. Putting the pieces together, he quickly deduces the truth. He tells Moon-seong that Cheol, deeming him unsuitable, hired an actor to impersonate him. He shows Moon-seong a picture of Jae-hyun. Moon-song stares at the image of his imposter, his expression unreadable. The following day, Ji-soon retrieves a hairpin from her jewelry box and gifts it to Yoon-hee, a seemingly small gesture with potentially significant implications. It was the first gift Ji-soon received from her second husband. She recounts the story to Yoon-hee. While running her seaside soup restaurant, a man stayed overnight, showing her unusual kindness. He later returned, thanking her for unknowingly helping him escape to Japan for a better life. Though he found opportunities abroad, he missed his homeland, and her restaurant had become a symbol of home. He gave her the hairpin, asking her to wear it while cooking to keep her hair out of the food. It was a flimsy excuse, of course. He simply wanted her to wear his gift. The next morning, as Ji-soon worked in her restaurant, her husband's delight at seeing her wearing the hairpin solidified their budding romance. Back in the present, Ji-soon, touched by the memory, shares this story with Yoon-hee, believing that as a woman, she can understand the sentiment behind the gift. Yoon-hee, however, is reluctant to accept such a meaningful keepsake. Ji-soon insists. That night, back in their room, Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee are burdened by guilt. The family's warmth and acceptance only amplify their deception. They want to end the charade, but they feel trapped. Jae-hyun resolves to create beautiful memories for Ji-soon, ensuring she has no regrets in her final days. Later, he slips into Ji-soon's room, cuddling beside her in bed. She's overjoyed. Since her other grandchildren grew up, she's rarely experienced such simple familial intimacy. Jae-hyun holds her hand as she drifts off to sleep. The following day, Yoon-hee returns to her own home. Her mother, lawyer SEO, is in the shower, so Yoon-hee slips into her office. Knowing her mother is helping Se-jun with the hotel acquisition, she searches for information. She opens a file on her mother's computer and discovers her diary, which reveals that Se-jun is still investigating Jae-hyun's identity. Alarmed, she returns to the villa and urges Jae-hyun to embrace his role as the long-lost grandson and accept the inheritance. It would, she argues, be the expected behavior. They can return the inheritance after Ji-soon's death to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, the real Moon-song, having learned about his imposter, decides to return to South Korea with a private investigator. The investigator prepares a hefty sum to buy Moon-song's freedom from the gangster. The negotiation, however, goes south. The gangster wants both the money and Moon-song. He takes the briefcase full of cash and then orders his men to attack. Moon-song, however, is a skilled fighter. He quickly dispatches the gangsters, allowing him and the investigator to escape without paying a dime. The next day, as the housekeeper cleans Ji-soon's room, she discovers bloodstains in the trash can, a chilling omen of the trouble that lies ahead. The housekeeper's discovery alarms her. The blood is a sign that Ji-soon's health is worsening. Despite this, Ji-soon insists on accompanying Se-yeon to the hotel that day, dressing impeccably and putting on a brave face. Sitting in her office, overlooking the bustling hotel, Ji-soon reflects on her grandchildren's different paths. Se-jun, once passionate about the hotel, now wants to sell it after their parents' death. Se-yeon, on the other hand, though drawn to art, has become the hotel's fiercest protector. Ji-soon feels a pang of guilt for forcing her granddaughter to abandon her dreams. Se-yeon, however, assures her she has no regrets. Her dreams, she explains, are contingent on the hotel's survival. Only with the hotel thriving can she, like Se-ju, pursue her passions. Ji-soon is relieved and reaffirms her faith in Se-yeon's leadership. That night, Se-ju seeks out Dong-jae, seeking comfort and advice. The thought of Ji-soon's impending death fills him with anxiety about his future, prompting him to consider finding a career. Without Ji-soon, he'll no longer be the carefree heir to a hotel fortune. He'll have to fend for himself. Dong-jae, seeing a vulnerable side to the usually carefree Se-ju, joins him for a drink. The following day, after his portrait gig ends, Jae-hyun requests a transfer back to the laundry room. He feigns humility, claiming it's a better fit for his skills. but his true motive is to avoid further scrutiny and risk of exposure. Meanwhile, a cruise ship from China approaches South Korea. The real Moon Song is finally nearing his destination. That same day, Hyo Jin returns to the hotel. She's leaving the country and wants to say goodbye to Jae Hyun. Si Yeon, assuming she means the portrait artist, tells her that he's her cousin from North Korea. Hyo Jin vehemently denies this, insisting he's a theater actor. She shows Si Yeon a photo of Jae Hyun on stage. Si Yeon is stunned. She immediately searches online for information about Jae Hyun, finding numerous photos of him in various plays. More alarmingly, Yoon Hee appears in some of the photos, confirming her suspicions about their fabricated relationship. While Si Yeon reels from this discovery, an oblivious Jae Hyun approaches her, intending to offer comfort about her colleague's transfer. He's taken aback by her cold demeanor and unresponsive silence. She avoids his gaze and asks him to leave. He retreats, confused and hurt. Late that night, Moon Song arrives at a secluded port in South Korea. He's eager to find his grandmother, but the investigator stops him. With an imposter already in place, Moon Song's sudden appearance would likely be dismissed as a hoax. They need to wait for the right opportunity. Moon Song is taken to a temporary lodging. Lying on a simple bed, he remembers his deceased wife. She had been gravely ill, in need of a kidney transplant. The memory fuels his determination to see his grandmother and fulfill his father's dying wish. But Moon Seong had been penniless, and he'd promised his wife he would never compromise his morals for money. As a result, she couldn't afford the life-saving treatment and died. The memory washes over him, his face etched with grief. Si Yeon spends a sleepless night at the office, consumed by her discovery. The next morning, she cancels her appointments and goes to the laundry room, seemingly wanting to confront Jae Hyun. But seeing him diligently working, she hesitates, unable to bring herself to speak. That night, back at the villa, sleep eludes her. She overhears hushed voices outside her window. Jae Hyun, Yoon Hee, and head manager Cheol are talking in secret. A new suspicion takes root. Is Cheol the mastermind behind this deception? The next day, as Si Yeon is about to tell Jim Soon the truth, Jim Soon's doctor arrives for a routine checkup. The results are not good. While Jim Soon's spirits are high, her physical condition continues to deteriorate. The doctor recommends she return to the hospital for treatment, but she refuses, wanting to spend her remaining time at home with Jae Hyun. She dismisses the doctor, her resolve unshakable. Si Yeon, witnessing her grandmother's stubbornness, understands. Revealing Jae Hyun's true identity would devastate Jim Soon, potentially accelerating her decline. She decides to remain silent. As she leaves for work, Jae Hyun appears, offering to drive her. He takes her hand, but she pulls away, her demeanor still cold and distant. Confused and hurt, he enters the living room, where he finds Si-gyu asleep on the sofa. When Si-gyu wakes, Jae Hyun asks about Si Yeon's recent moodiness, but Si-gyu seems unconcerned. Inviting him for breakfast, Jae Hyun readily agrees, and they leave together arm in arm. As they're leaving, they encounter Sejun at the door. He's surprised by their camaraderie, but doesn't comment. Unbeknownst to them, someone is watching from the shadows, a camera capturing their every move. The private investigator has taken photos of all three grandchildren, documenting their interactions with Jae Hyun. Sejun, the only one who hasn't interacted with Jae Hyun, becomes the investigator's target. He assumes Sejun is the most likely to want to know the truth about Moon Seong's identity. He sends Sejun a cryptic text message, claiming that the Jae Hyun in their house is an imposter, and that he knows the whereabouts of the real grandson. To the investigator's surprise, Sejun is extremely cautious. He immediately calls the investigator, sternly warning him to cease contact or face legal consequences. However, the seed of doubt has been planted. Sejun, ever suspicious, begins to question the validity of the DNA test. That night, he asks Si-ju if he's certain the hair sample he provided was indeed Jae Hyun's. Si-ju affirms his certainty, and Sejun drops the subject, though his suspicions linger. The next day, the investigator visits Moon Song's lodging, only to find it empty. Moon Song, tired of hiding, has decided to take matters into his own hands and go to the hotel himself. At the reception desk, he demands to see the highest-ranking manager, creating a commotion. The staff immediately alerts Si Yeon, who rushes down from her office. At that moment, Jae Hyun happens to be passing by. He approaches the desk, his heart pounding in his chest. Having studied Moon Seong's file extensively, he recognizes the rough, unkempt man as the real grandson. Knowing that a senior manager is on their way, and fearing exposure, Jae Hyun quickly improvises. He pretends to be a fellow North Korean, calming Moon Song down, and skillfully guiding him out of the hotel, just before Si Yeon arrives. With Moon Seong temporarily out of the picture, Jae Hyun immediately calls Yoon Hee. frantically relaying the news of Moon Seong's appearance. That evening, he and Yoon-hee meet with head manager Cheol, recounting the close call. Cheol calmly analyzes the situation. Moon Seong's objective is clearly to see Ji-soon, but the question is whether he acted alone or had help. If he had help, who was it? When Moon Seong returns to the safe house, the investigator is waiting. He's relieved to learn that not only did Jae-hyun recognize Moon Seong, but Moon Seong also recognized Jae-hyun from the photo the investigator had shown him. Moon Seong, impressed by Jae-hyun's performance, agrees with the investigator's plan. They need to wait for the perfect opportunity to expose the imposter. Just then, the investigator's phone rings. It's Cheol. He declines the call, knowing he can only avoid him for so long. That evening, as he enters his office, he finds Cheol waiting for him. Cheol questions him about his recent activities, his tone laced with suspicion. The investigator claims he's busy with a new case. Cheol doesn't press further, but he issues a thinly veiled threat, reminding the investigator never to ignore his calls again. The investigator apologizes, his fear palpable, but resentment simmers beneath the surface. That night, he and Moon Seong visit Sejun, revealing the truth about Cheol and Jae-hyun's deception. The game has changed. Sejun listens thoughtfully, but ever cautious. He demands concrete proof before agreeing to cooperate. He reminds them that the DNA test confirmed Jae-hyun's relation to Ji-soon. The investigator needs to provide evidence more compelling than a DNA test to refute that conclusion. Both the investigator and Moon Seong are stunned, realizing the cleverness of head manager Cheol's scheme. But there's no evidence more compelling than a DNA test. The investigator's only option is to have Moon Seong take a DNA test in front of Sejun. They suspect that Jae-hyun's hair sample was somehow switched with Segyu's, perhaps during the submission process. Sejun immediately takes Moon Seong to the hospital. The results confirm that Moon Seong is indeed Ji-soon's grandson. This revelation both satisfies and disturbs Sejun. The next day at breakfast, he engages in unusually playful banter with Jae-hyun, almost relishing his performance. He knows Jae-hyun's charade is about to be exposed. Mid-meal, he receives a call from the investigator, informing him that he and Moon Seong are outside. He excuses himself from the table. While eager to expose Jae-hyun, Sejun knows this isn't the right time or place. He insists they meet at his office instead. Back at the breakfast table, he makes no mention of the interruption, but Jae-hyun senses something is amiss. After breakfast, he calls Yoon-hee and head manager Cheol, describing Se-yeon's sudden coldness and Sejun's unusual friendliness. Seeing their surprise, he concludes that their deception has been discovered. Coupled with Moon Seong's return, this revelation is a ticking time bomb. Once it detonates, everyone's fate will be irrevocably altered. Cheol, after a moment of silence, suggests they deal with the immediate threat, Moon Seong. He follows Sejun to the company parking garage. In his office, Sejun explains to Moon Seong that the biggest obstacle is Ji-soon's unwavering belief in Jae-hyun. They need to expose Jae-hyun gently and convince Ji-soon to accept the truth before revealing Moon Seong's existence. They can't risk shattering her fragile emotional state. Moon Seong reluctantly agrees. As they leave Sejun's office, Cheol, watching from the shadows, sees the investigator escorting Moon Seong away. He understands. After they leave, Sejun begins his investigation into Jae-hyun. He calls a reporter, providing Moon Seong's name and letting them connect the dots. Back at his office, Moon Seong is restless and uneasy. Despite his discomfort, he agrees with Sejun's cautious approach. He knows that confronting Ji-soon directly could have devastating consequences. The waiting game continues, the tension building with each passing moment. He believes he's not the grandson who can truly make Ji-soon happy. The comfort and care he could offer pale in comparison to Jae-hyun's performance. The investigator disagrees, arguing that Moon Seong deserves his share of the inheritance after enduring so much to reach South Korea. Just then, head manager Cheol arrives. The investigator tenses, but Cheol ignores him, addressing Moon Seong directly. He appeals to Moon Seong's sense of familial duty, urging him to stay hidden until after Ji-soon's death. He promises to deliver Moon Seong his rightful inheritance afterward. For now, Ji-soon needs a good grandson, someone to provide comfort in her final days. Moon Seong, enraged, grabs Cheol by the collar, but Cheol simply laughs, pointing out Moon Seong's volatile temper and suggesting that Ji-soon would never accept him in his current state. The words strike a nerve, and Moon Seong storms off, his anger simmering. Cheol then turns his attention to the investigator, issuing a stern reprimand. He orders him to become a double agent, cooperating with Sejun while secretly reporting back to Cheol. That night, Se-yeon watches from her window, as Jae-hyun keeps Ji-soon company in the garden. She's torn. Despite his deception, the warmth he brings to the family is undeniable. Unable to sleep, she slips out of the house and goes to her seaside studio, where she's working on a family portrait. After a moment of contemplation, she picks up her brush and includes Jae-hyun in the painting. The following day, Cheol informs Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee that their secret is out. Moon-seong has met with Se-jun. Cheol suggests it's time to tell Jim-soon the truth, but Jae-hyun disagrees. They need to buy more time, first figuring out who else knows about their deception. Cheol reluctantly agrees. Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee split up. Yoon-hee goes to Se-jun's wife, hoping to glean information, while Jae-hyun seeks out Se-yeon. She offers him a ride to the hotel, and during the drive, he tries to broach the subject of her sudden coldness. But the words catch in his throat. Se-yeon suggests he quit his job at the hotel and focus on caring for Jim-soon. He agrees, disappointed that he couldn't uncover the reason for her behavior change. At the hotel, Se-yeon replays a conversation she had with Se-jun that morning. He had seemed unusually confident, claiming to possess a trump card that would guarantee his victory in the inheritance battle. She worries that this has something to do with Jae-hyun's true identity. The pieces of the puzzle are falling into place, and she fears the consequences. Lost in thought, Se-yeon is interrupted by a staff member announcing the arrival of a reporter wanting to write a story about Moon-seong. Se-yeon greets the reporter with suspicion. This reporter is persistent, demanding an interview with Moon-seong. Se-yeon is caught in a difficult position. Allowing the reporter access could expose Jae-hyun's true identity much sooner than she anticipated. She realizes she can no longer consider Jae-hyun a reliable ally. His shares in the company, while helpful, are not enough to give her the leverage she needs against her older brother, Se-jun. Sensing the rising danger, Se-yeon has no choice but to turn back to Dong-ji. In the end, he remains her most powerful potential ally. That evening, Se-yeon declines a dinner invitation from Jae-hyun, opting instead to meet with Dong-ji. Over dinner, the conversation steers towards company shares. Dong-ji's position remains unchanged. He will offer Se-yeon his full support, but only if they marry. Se-yeon remains non-committal, only telling Dong-ji that she'll consider his proposal. Later that night, Dong-ji receives a message from Se-jun, abruptly ending their partnership. This sudden shift leaves Dong-ji puzzled. What's happening within the Jim-soon family? Why would Se-jun, who was so eager for his help before, suddenly cut ties? And why is Se-yeon, who has consistently rejected him, now showing signs of reconciliation? Yoon-hee tries to glean information from her sister-in-law, but learns nothing. Se-yeon continues to avoid Jae-hyun. That night, both lie awake in their beds, troubled by unanswered questions. The next morning, Dong-ji confronts Se-jun, demanding an explanation for his sudden change of heart. Se-jun doesn't hold back, revealing his suspicions of an imposter within the family, pointing the finger directly at Jae-hyun. Knowing Se-yeon had also approached Dong-ji about marriage, Se-jun realizes she must have discovered the truth about Jae-hyun, prompting her to seek alternative alliances. Meanwhile, Moon-seong has vanished after being dismissed from the office by manager Cheol. He hasn't returned home. A worried detective informs manager Cheol of the situation. Moon-seong is a ticking time bomb, and finding him quickly is crucial to preventing any rash actions. The annual reunion for separated Korean families arrives. Jim-soon goes out alone, sitting quietly in a cafe, lost in memories. She recalls the agonizing separation from her husband and newborn child during the evacuation, and their emotional reunion years later, along with Moon-seong. Despite the passage of time, the pain of those separations remains fresh in her heart. Outside the cafe, Moon-seong watches Jim-soon from afar. He remembers this day and this place, where he met his grandmother as a child. He approaches and sits down opposite her. Despite Se-yeon's refusal to grant an interview, the persistent reporter has managed to snap some photos of Jae-hyun. He continues to pressure Se-yeon, threatening to publish the incriminating information unless she agrees to a public interview. Se-yeon considers her options and proposes a more enticing alternative. She will marry Dong-ji and offer the reporter exclusive coverage of the wedding. Intrigued, the reporter immediately presses for details about Se-yeon and Dong-ji's supposed reconciliation. Just then, Jae-hyun arrives at the office. Hearing about Se-yeon's impending marriage to Dong-ji, he's furious. He steps forward, offering himself for the interview instead of Se-yeon, and pulls her away from the reporter. Se-yeon, however, is not grateful. At the door, she pushes his hand away, warning him to stay out of her affairs. They are strangers, she reminds him, coldly using Jae-hyun's real name, laying everything bare. Meanwhile, Jim-soon continues to reminisce in the cafe. Suddenly, Moon Song sits down across from her. The familiar North Korean accent in his voice immediately puts her at ease. She welcomes the young man's company and begins to talk, almost without pause, about her younger days, the forced separation from her family, and her journey alone to South Korea to make a living. For most of her life, she longed for the son and grandson she left behind. But thankfully, in her later years, she was reunited with a polite, kind, and genuine grandson, bringing comfort to her heart. Moon Song listens, feeling a pang of discomfort. Perhaps Manager Cheol was right. The grandson who brought comfort to Jeom Soon wasn't him, but the imposter. After sharing her story, Jeom Soon asks Moon Seong if he has any relatives in South Korea. He replies that he might have a grandmother, but his family situation is complicated. His deceased father had transformed all the love and longing for his grandmother into resentment and blame. These few words bring tears to Jeom Soon's eyes. She feels a sense of empathy, realizing this might explain her own son's anger upon their reunion. Moon Seong abruptly stands to leave, explaining that the person she's waiting for won't be coming. Strangely, after Moon Seong leaves, Jeom Soon is flooded with memories of the train station. The day she parted with a young Moon Seong. Tears stream down her face. Back at the hotel, Jae Hyun, seeing Si Yeon harassed by the reporter, intervenes once more. This time, Si Yeon is not only ungrateful, but she reveals Jae Hyun's true identity, calling him by his real name. She explains that the reporter has photos of him and knows he is the grandson living in the hotel, demanding an interview. But Jae Hyun is an imposter, and she can't risk his face appearing on the cover of major magazines. Her only option was to use the news of her marriage to Dong-ji as a distraction. She justifies her actions by acknowledging that she knows Jae Hyun's deception wasn't malicious, but driven by a desire to fulfill Jeom Soon's wishes. Despite revealing the truth, Si Yeon still harbors a lingering doubt. Were all of Jae Hyun's previous acts of kindness and concern merely a performance? Jae Hyun immediately denies this, earnestly assuring her that his feelings for her are genuine. After leaving the restaurant, Jeom Soon returns to the hotel and joins Se Yeon in the garden. She recalls her conversation with Moon Seong, particularly his description of his father's feelings towards his grandmother, mirroring her strained relationship with her son. Jeom Soon, her mind still on the conversation with Moon Song, asks Si Yeon what the family would think if they discovered Jae Hyun wasn't her real grandson. Si Yeon tenses, quickly changing the subject. Jeom Soon doesn't press the issue, recalling her initial shock at meeting Jae Hyun. His striking resemblance to her late husband had convinced her of their familial connection. That evening, Jae Hyun informs Manager Cheol of an urgent meeting. While Manager Cheol and Yoon-hee anxiously wait, Yoon-hee, unaware of the unfolding drama, continues to dutifully play the role of Jae Hyun's wife. To their surprise, Si Yeon enters. Jae Hyun leads her into the room, expressing his desire to start anew with her. Manager Cheol realizes Si Yeon has discovered the truth. After their conversation, Si Yeon declares she won't expose them. Jae Hyun and Yoon-hee can continue their charade. Later, she speaks privately with Manager Cheol. While admitting she can't condone the deception, she understands his good intentions. Ultimately, everyone's goal was Jeom Soon's happiness, so Si Yeon accepts Manager Cheol's actions. 2 days later, Si Yeon brings the trio to her private seaside studio, a secluded location where they can speak freely. Manager Cheol finally explains everything. He initially found the real Moon Song, but he was a dangerous criminal involved in robbery and murder at the border. He couldn't bring such a grandson to Jeom Soon, leading him to orchestrate the imposter plan. Worryingly, the real Moon Song has arrived in South Korea and is colluding with Sejun. Si Yeon is stunned. She hadn't contacted the reporters who had been harassing her, but now she realizes. Sejun also knows about Jae Hyun's false identity. She concludes that Sejun is orchestrating a scheme to expose Jae Hyun and then introduce the real Moon Seong. The situation has become incredibly complicated. She instructs everyone to remain calm, feign ignorance, and try to uncover Sejun's plan. She tasks Manager Cheol with finding the real Moon Song and keeping her informed. Si Yeon feels the weight of responsibility heavily on her shoulders. She must protect not only Jeom Soon's hotel, but also the precious memories she shares with her kind grandson. Inside the studio, Yoon-hee notices a large photograph of a young Jeom Soon with the hotel staff. A handsome young man stands out. Si Yeon identifies him as a young Manager Cheol. Both Jae Hyun and Yoon-hee are surprised, remarking on how time has changed him. Seeing the photo, Manager Cheol is overcome with emotion, remembering his first encounter with Jeom Soon. He was a low-level gangster, and during a clash with a rival gang, they had disrupted Jeom Soon's hotel. As Manager Cheol was about to commit an act of violence, Jeom Soon intervened. She wasn't worried about the disruption, but rather lamented the wasted life Cheol was leading. Jeom soon saved him, firmly stating he now owed her a debt. From that day forward, manager Cheol stayed and worked at the hotel, vowing not to leave until he repaid his debt. He started as a bellhop and worked his way up through diligence and hard work. On payday, Jeom soon personally handed him his wages. Her actions a testament to her belief that hard work is always rewarded. This was the moment captured in the cherished hotel photo. Manager Cheol continued to improve himself, remaining by Jeom soon's side. He also found love there, his wife being the housekeeper of the main house, also pictured in her younger days. Jae-hyun remarks on her beauty. The next day, Yoon-hee sends Se-yeon an email. It contains an analysis of the hotel's stock performance. Se-yeon immediately meets with Yoon-hee, who explains that recent trends indicate a group is consistently buying hotel shares. This suggests an attempt to either inflate the stock price or gradually increase their ownership stake, likely a ploy by Se-jun. Se-yeon is impressed by Yoon-hee's analysis. Yoon-hee hesitates, then reveals that her mother, a lawyer working for Se-jun, is meticulous and wouldn't undertake such a plan without confidence. Yoon-hee proposes, using Se-yeon's influence, to counter her mother and protect the hotel. The best way to thwart Se-jun's gradual takeover is to inflate the stock price themselves, disrupting his timeline. Se-yeon realizes her relationship with Dong-ji might be the key to achieving this. Since parting with Moon-seong, Jeom soon can't shake the memory of the young man she met only once. Even Jae-hyun's warmth and companionship can't alleviate her unease. Unbeknownst to her, Moon-seong remains close by, observing her. Seeing the cheerful interactions between Jae-hyun and Jeom soon fills him with a deep sense of loneliness. While Jae-hyun is working in the hotel laundry, Dong-jae summons him. Jae-hyun, aware of the tension between them, anticipates a swift, unpleasant encounter. However, Dong-jae drops the pretense, telling Jae-hyun he needn't feign his North Korean accent any longer. He knows Jae-hyun is an imposter. Jae-hyun is caught off guard, but Dong-ji tells him to relax. Jae-hyun has inadvertently paved the way for his marriage to Se-yeon. He warns Jae-hyun to play his part well and avoid causing trouble, especially regarding his feelings for Se-yeon. It turns out Dong-ji had long suspected the unspoken connection between them. While their supposed cousin relationship provided a convenient cover, the revelation of Jae-hyun's true identity intensifies Dong-ji's anxieties. Later that day, Yoon-hee's sister-in-law urgently seeks her out. The same women who had mocked her at the previous party are causing trouble again. They invite Yoon-hee's sister-in-law for a golf outing, intending to humiliate her again. Lacking a partner, the sister-in-law asks Yoon-hee for help. Coincidentally, Yoon-hee has been eager for revenge. Se-jun, however, remains wary. He approaches Yoon-hee, but she pleads with him to temporarily overlook her and Jae-hyun's deception so they can help her sister-in-law. Since the previous encounter, when Yoon-hee heard the woman boast about being a Harvard alumna, she had a friend investigate. The woman wasn't a legitimate Harvard graduate, but she flaunted the false credential upon returning to Korea. On the day of the golf outing, Yoon-hee and Jae-hyun joined forces. They not only outplayed the woman on the course, but also arranged for an acquaintance of hers to expose her fabricated Harvard background publicly. Humiliated, the woman flees in disgrace. Meanwhile, Moon-seong, wandering through South Korea, encounters a former associate. This man reveals he learned about Moon-seong's family from the detective. Had he known about Moon-seong's wealthy grandmother, he would have paid for his return to South Korea long ago. And Moon-seong's wife's liver transplant could have happened sooner. It turns out Moon-seong's wife isn't dead, but is clinging to life, waiting for a liver donor. Despite recognizing the man's manipulative tactics, Moon-seong is swayed by the possibility of saving his wife. Following Se-yeon and Dong-ji's engagement announcement, the dynamics between Se-yeon and Se-jun shift. The reporter Se-jun had sent is now on Se-yeon's side, swayed by the promise of exclusive wedding coverage and future hotel renovation news. Sensing trouble, Se-jun contacts the detective, urging him and Moon-seong to prepare for their upcoming plan. The detective agrees, but after hanging up, he paces anxiously, still unable to locate the missing Moon-seong. The following day, Yoon-hee sits daydreaming on a bench, with Se-yu beside her. Se-ju begins humming the North Korean children's song. Yoon-hee sang to Jeom soon on her first day at the house. He had secretly recorded Jeom soon's smile that day, a rare moment of warmth in their family. Se-ju expresses his sincere gratitude to Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee, believing their presence has brought joy to Jeom soon's life. His heartfelt words touch Yoon-hee, inspiring her to do something special for Jeom soon. She returns to the house and proposes a pampering session for Jeom soon with her sister-in-law. They set up a shaded area in the courtyard with a comfortable lounge chair. The sister-in-law massages Jim-soon's feet while Yoon-hee paints her nails. Jim-soon clutches Yoon-hee's hand, deeply touched by her care. While they haven't interacted much in the past, Jim-soon expresses her desire to get to know her kind granddaughter-in-law better. Seeing everyone enjoying themselves, Si-yeon joins in. They apply a face mask to Jim-soon, making her feel youthful. As the salon session ends, Si-yeon asks her sister-in-law whose idea it was. Impressed by Jim-soon's happiness, learning it was Yoon-hee's suggestion, Si-yeon smiles, pleased with her decision to trust them. That evening, a drunken Moon Seong runs into Dong-jae. Noticing Moon Seong's North Korean accent and demeanor, Dong-jae has an idea. The details of their conversation remain unclear. But after Moon Seong leaves, Dong-jae calls Se-jun to request a meeting. Moon Seong finally returns to the detective's office. The relieved detective embraces him, but Moon Seong pushes him away, bluntly stating he's contacted Se-jun and intends to reclaim what is rightfully his. The following day, Jae-hyun sees the news of Se-yeon's upcoming marriage to Dong-jae. While in the hotel laundry, he rushes to her office, but Se-yeon remains cold, telling him to stay out of her affairs. The marriage might have been avoided, she explains, but because of Jae-hyun's deception, the real Moon Seong has aligned with Se-jun, leaving her with no choice but to marry Dong-jae to protect the hotel. Frustrated, Jae-hyun leaves. Immediately after his departure, Se-yeon calls Dong-jae, inviting him for dinner at the house. Yoon-hee's sister-in-law is thrilled by the news, observing that after multiple breakups, Se-yeon seems serious this time, even inviting her fiancé to the house. Yoon-hee remains silent, knowing Jae-hyun is heartbroken. Jae-hyun returns home and lies on the bed, ignoring Yoon-hee. Se-yeon and Dong-jae meet with Jim-soon. She's indifferent to their wedding plans, only concerned about her health and urging them not to rush. Dong-jae misinterprets her coolness as disapproval, but Jim-soon clarifies that she doesn't dislike him. She simply hopes Se-yeon marries for love. She acknowledges Dong-jae's intelligence, but notes his lack of empathy, hoping someone can change that. Moon Seong meets with Se-jun, who proposes that after inheriting his share, Moon Seong transfer it to him, in exchange for a large sum of money, enough to live comfortably for the rest of his life. When Moon Seong asks why, Se-jun reveals his desire to sell the hotel, as it holds only bad memories for him. This aligns perfectly with Moon Seong's resentment towards the hotel, blaming it for keeping Jim-soon in South Korea, away from him and his father. That evening, Moon Seong sits alone in a bar, torn between love and hate for Jim-soon, and burdened by thoughts of his ailing wife. The turmoil of his emotions leads him to lash out at a stranger who mocks his accent. The detective is once again called to deal with the aftermath of Moon Seong's violence. The next day, Yoon-hee finally decides to confess her feelings to Jae-hyun, but he's waiting for Se-yeon at the door. When Se-yeon arrives, Jae-hyun confesses his love, begging her not to marry Dong-jae. To his surprise, Se-yeon reciprocates. Hidden from view, Yoon-hee witnesses their mutual confession and walks away heartbroken. Unbeknownst to her, Se-yeon's next words clarify that she's only in love with the role Jae-hyun plays, not the real him. She knows little about the real Jae-hyun, let alone loves him. The failed confession leaves Jae-hyun restless. The next morning, he sees the fatigue on Se-yeon's face, indicating she too had a sleepless night. He tries to lift her spirits, inviting her to commute together, but she declines. At breakfast, Se-yeon encounters Yoon-hee and, seizing the opportunity, inquires about her relationship with Jae-hyun. Yoon-hee casually replies that they're just colleagues in Jae-hyun's eyes. Se-yeon, however, finds this hard to believe, pointing out their close proximity working and living together. She presses Yoon-hee, asking who Jae-hyun is to her, but Yoon-hee deflects, asking Se-yeon if she loves Jae-hyun. Se-yeon laughs, saying she only loves the character he portrays as her brother. Relieved, Yoon-hee nods, thinking she worried needlessly. A wealthy heiress like Se-yeon could never fall for an ordinary man like Jae-hyun. However, this makes Se-yeon wonder if she could ever accept and love the real Jae-hyun. Later that day, Jae-hyun skips a gathering with friends to seek advice from Se-ju. He confesses his feelings for Se-yeon, but admits he doesn't understand her. Se-ju, a veteran of romance, advises him not to change himself for someone else, but to be true to himself and win her over with sincerity and persistence. Meanwhile, Se-jun talks with Moon Seong. Learning of Moon Seong's resentment towards the hotel, Se-jun finds common ground. However, Se-jun hates the hotel itself, blaming it for his parents' accidental deaths, while Moon Seong's resentment is directed at Jim-soon for staying in South Korea and building a new life. while he and his father struggled in North Korea. Sejun encourages Moonsong to hold on to this resentment and remain on his side. That evening, the detective informs manager Cheol that Sejun has reached an agreement with Moonseong and plans to introduce him to Jim-soon. Manager Cheol immediately shares this with Se-yeon and the others. Jae-hyun suggests confessing everything to Jim-soon, hoping for forgiveness, but Se-yeon disagrees. Now is not the time. To thwart Sejun's plan, she decides to speak with Moonseong privately. The next day, Sejun receives news that Jim-soon wants to spend her final days at the hotel. Instead of sadness, he sees this as the perfect opportunity for Moonsong to meet her. He takes Moonseong to Jim-soon's apartment, but Se-yeon answers the door. She's not surprised to see them, suggesting she anticipated their arrival. It's revealed that Jim-soon's stay at the hotel was a ruse to lure out Moonseong. Jim-soon is actually on a trip to the south with Jae-hyun. Se-yeon urges Moonsong to leave. If he has any regard for his grandmother, he won't cause her further pain. She promises to give him his share of the inheritance after Jim-soon's death, assuming his only motivation is money. This last comment triggers Moonseong. He angrily corrects her, stating that he wants not only the money but also to inflict pain on Jim-soon, making her suffer as he and his father have. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun has taken Jim-soon to a quiet town, a peaceful escape from the city's hustle and bustle. He tells her it reminds him of his hometown, a comment intended to please her, but one that inadvertently puts him in a difficult position. Jim-soon begins reminiscing about her own family, trapped in a restricted area of North Korea, unable to leave or be reached. She asks Jae-hyun about his childhood, wanting to know what experiences shaped him into the kind of man he is today. The question throws him, and he avoids answering directly. That evening, Jae-hyun arranges a riverside dinner, and Se-yeon joins them. Jim-soon, watching them interact, marvels at the strange twists of fate. Se-yeon resembles a younger version of herself, while Jae-hyun bears a striking resemblance to her late husband. Seeing them together evokes memories of her own past. Meanwhile, Moonsong receives a sum of money from Se-yeon. He meets with a gangster, who promises to help find a liver for his ailing wife, and hands him a letter from her. The letter is filled with love, gratitude, and longing. His wife, a gentle and kind woman, had filled the void of maternal love in his life. He loved her deeply. She was his reason for living. The next day, Jae-hyun takes Jim-soon to the beach. Se-yeon arrives, and as Jim-soon watches them talk, she drifts into a memory of her first encounter with her late husband. She was running a restaurant in North Korea when he stumbled in, collapsing before he could speak. She took him in and cared for him until he regained consciousness. He was escaping across the border, on his way to Seoul for an education. When he recovered, she bought him provisions and watched him leave, never imagining the profound impact he would have on her life. Outside the dream, Jim-soon sits in her wheelchair, seemingly asleep. When Se-yeon and Jae-hyun arrive, they find her unconscious. She's rushed to the hospital and admitted to intensive care. The doctor delivers grim news. Her condition is critical. She could pass away at any moment. Outside the ICU, Jae-hyun is consumed by guilt, blaming himself for taking Jim-soon on the trip that led to her collapse. Se-yeon comforts him, assuring him it's not his fault. Since his arrival, Jim-soon has been happier than she's been in years. Sejun and Se-ju arrive. Upon seeing Jae-hyun, Se-ju punches him in the face. Sejun intervenes, reminding them they're family and shouldn't fight outside Jim-soon's room. Se-yeon echoes the sentiment, urging them to keep quiet. That night, sleep eludes everyone at the villa. As Jim-soon lies in critical condition, Sejun finally reveals the truth about Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee. The family is devastated, their trust betrayed. They had welcomed the couple into their lives, only to discover it was all a lie. Exposed and with no reason to stay, Jae-hyun and Yoon-hee pack their bags. Only the housekeeper sees them off, thanking them for bringing joy into Jim-soon's life. She reminds Yoon-hee to take the notebook from her bedside table, a memento of her time at the villa. Jae-hyun leaves with a heavy heart, and Se-yeon watches from the window, her own heart aching. Even Sejun feels a pang of regret, remembering Yoon-hee's kindness to his wife, and the genuine friendship they'd formed. He knows his wife has few friends and rarely connects with anyone on such a deep level. Back in their apartment, Jae-hyun looks around, sighing that it's all over. He feels a sense of incompletion, a lingering attachment to the family he'd grown close to. Yoon-hee shares his sentiment, reluctant to let go. She asks her mother for advice. If a job ends earlier than expected, should she walk away or see it through? Her mother advises her to leave. Continuing would be driven by emotion, not business sense, and investing too much emotionally can be detrimental. The next day, Se-yeon arrives at the hotel and cancels all her appointments. She wants to be at the hospital with Ji Soon. Compared to the inheritance battle and Jae Hyun's deception, nothing else matters. Ji Soon has always been her anchor, and the thought of losing her fills her with a profound sense of loneliness and helplessness. Jae Hyun quits his job at the laundry room. As he packs his belongings, memories of Si Yeon flood his mind. He goes to her office to say goodbye. Si Yeon is in a fragile state, tears streaming down her face as she talks about Ji Soon. Jae Hyun sits beside her, offering comfort and holding her hand as she sobs against his shoulder. Their connection, despite the deception, is undeniable. Dong-ji observes this tender scene from afar. Witnessing Si Yeon's vulnerability deepens Jae Hyun's concern for the family. After a sleepless night, he decides to follow his heart. If he's not ready to leave the stage, he'll finish the play. He opens his laptop and begins writing a new script. The next day, Se-jun arrives at the hotel with a team of assessors. He barges into Si Yeon's office, declaring that it's time she faced reality. With Moon Seong's shares in his control, even if she were to marry Dong-ji, she couldn't win. Si Yeon is disgusted by her brother's ruthlessness, his eagerness to sell the hotel while their grandmother is still alive, but her protests are futile. After the assessment, Se-jun reveals Moon Seong's identity to the family and brings him to the villa. Seeing the real family reunited, he urges Si Yeon to give up the fight. The sale of the hotel is inevitable. He reminds head manager Cheol and the housekeeper that if Ji Soon leaves them any inheritance, they should return it to him. Si-jun's arrogance infuriates Si Yeon, and even Se-yu can't defend him. Finally, Cheol, who has remained silent until now, speaks. He argues that their parents' deaths were a tragic accident, not a consequence of Ji Soon's ambition. Similarly, he points out that Moon Seong's hardships in North Korea aren't Ji Soon's fault. Both brothers, he suggests, are emotionally stunted, lashing out at their loved ones because they haven't received the love and attention they craved. He admits to orchestrating Jae Hyun's deception, explaining that he did it to repay Ji Soon, hoping to give her the joy of family she'd been denied for so long. His only regret, he says, is that Ji Soon won't see her grandchildren reconciled before she dies. His words hang heavy in the air, silencing the room. Moon Seong moves into the villa and begins exploring his new surroundings. Si-ju attempts to bond with him, putting an arm around his shoulder, but Moon Seong shrugs him off. His coldness only makes Si-ju miss Jae Hyun more. One day, as Yoon-hee works from home, she receives a document from Jae Hyun. It's a play script titled, "The Final Performance." She immediately arranges to meet him. The situation feels eerily familiar, echoing the day he'd first asked her to play his wife. Seeing that Yoon-hee had caught on, Jae Hyun dropped the act. This time, he had two accomplices, friends he'd made at the laundromat. He declared this would be the perfect finale to their performance. The four of them gathered at Jae Hyun's place to strategize. Suddenly, Jae Hyun's phone rang. It was Se-ju. He excused himself and went to meet him. Se-ju was overjoyed to see Jae Hyun, as if no time had passed. They sat by the beach, and Se-ju confessed that meeting the real Moon Seong made him understand why head manager Cheol had hired Jae Hyun in the first place. Moon Seong was withdrawn and distant, unlike Jae Hyun's open and engaging nature. They moved to a restaurant to continue their conversation. Se-ju revealed his ambition to become an actor. Coming from a wealthy family, he'd always lived a comfortable, carefree life. But witnessing Jae Hyun's captivating stage presence had ignited a spark. He wanted Jae Hyun to be his acting coach. He had the time, the resources, and now, the desire. Jae Hyun considered this for a moment, an idea forming in his mind. He mentioned he had a script, and asked if Si-ju would be interested in taking a look. Si-ju readily agreed, and they headed to a rehearsal space to work on the final performance. Si-ju's role? Himself. Jae Hyun quickly secured a theater for the production. That evening, the detective returned to his office to find Moon Seong asleep on the sofa. Moon Seong admitted he felt uncomfortable in the grand villa and preferred the familiarity of the detective's office. In his eyes, the detective was his only true friend in South Korea. His relatives in the mansion felt like hostile strangers. The detective sensed Moon Seong's profound loneliness and chose not to press him further. With the final performance taking shape, Jae Hyun reached out to head manager Cheol and Si Yeon, hoping to enlist their help. He truly wanted this performance to be a gift for Ji Soon. Meanwhile, in her hospital bed, the unconscious Ji Soon stirred, her fingers twitching. She was dreaming again, reliving the past, specifically her first encounter with her husband. After he left, she was fired from her job for allowing him to stay overnight without paying. Ji Soon was forced to pack her meager belongings and search for another place to stay. Miraculously, after some time, her husband returned to find her. After days of searching, he finally located her working at another restaurant. He confessed his feelings for her, revealing he'd even given up a chance to go to Seoul just to find her. This time, he vowed never to leave her side again. He wanted to be with Ji-Soon forever. Hearing this, Ji-Soon smiled and squeezed his hand. Back in the present, Si-yeon found herself reminiscing about Jae-hyun. Warm, playful memories flickered through her mind. Just then, Jae-hyun appeared in her office. He paused, seeing her lost in thought, not wanting to interrupt. Only when she noticed him did he explain his visit. He wanted to put on one last performance for her grandmother, and invited Se-yeon to bring her. He also wanted to show Se-yeon the real him, the actor. This, he declared with a playful grin, was his true introduction. Se-yeon couldn't help but laugh. The ice between them began to melt, a return to the easy rapport they'd once shared. However, news of Jae-hyun's presence at the hotel reached Dong-jae. He confronted Jae-hyun, calling him a fraud, and telling him to leave after the performance. Did he want to see Ji-Soon die before he was satisfied? Hearing his grandmother insulted, Jae-hyun's anger flared. Now that he was no longer playing a role, he didn't hold back. He called Dong-jae out for being a man whose true nature couldn't be hidden. Dong-jae, used to winning at everything, couldn't stand losing, especially not to Se-yeon. That's why he was so desperate to force their marriage, to create a picture-perfect life. But even if he succeeded, Jae-hyun argued, he wouldn't be happy. What he truly desired wasn't Se-yeon's hand in marriage, but her heart. He loved her. Dong-jae, stung by Jae-hyun's words, slammed his glass on the table, shattering it. At that moment, his secretary arrived with the finalized wedding invitations. Dong-jae stared at them, remembering Jae-hyun's earlier question to Se-yeon. Was her marriage to him based on love? Se-yeon had remained silent. Dong-jae sighed, unsure if pushing her into marriage was the right thing to do. The next day, Se-yeon received news that her grandmother had awakened and was asking for her grandson. Her brothers, learning this, prepared to contact Moon-seong, but Se-yeon stopped them. Fearing the shock of the truth would worsen her grandmother's condition, she wanted Jae-hyun to see her first. Upon receiving the news, Jae-hyun rushed to the hospital. Se-yeon reminded him that this would be his last time playing Moon-seong. As Jae-hyun entered the room, Ji-Soon, weak but lucid, apologized to him. She'd almost left without saying goodbye, leaving her grandson all alone without a goodbye. Hearing this, Jae-hyun broke down, tears streaming down his face. He apologized profusely, even confessing that he wasn't the real Moon-seong. But Ji-Soon seemed to already know. She'd noticed clues earlier. She thanked him for bringing her so much joy. Through his sobs, Jae-hyun formally introduced himself and invited her to his final performance, a tribute to her. Ji-Soon readily accepted. After his emotional farewell, Jae-hyun sought out Yoon-hee and revealed everything that had transpired with Ji-Soon. Knowing Ji-Soon was happy with their relationship brought Yoon-hee immense relief. Jae-hyun then asked Yoon-hee to accompany him on an errand. That evening, head manager Cheol met with Jae-hyun, expressing his guilt over deceiving Ji-Soon. Jae-hyun comforted him, assuring him that Ji-Soon held no resentment. In fact, her willingness to continue the charade after learning the truth proved she understood his motivations. Head manager Cheol laughed, grateful for Jae-hyun's words. Jae-hyun then requested a meeting with Moon-seong. Head manager Cheol agreed. As he went to find Moon-seong, he was intercepted by the lawyer handling Ji-Soon's estate. The lawyer needed to discuss matters of inheritance with him and Miss Jung. Later, under head manager Cheol's guidance, Jae-hyun and Moon-seong finally met. Jae-hyun greeted him warmly, but Moon-seong remained reserved. Jae-hyun explained his purpose. He wanted Moon-seong to experience what it felt like to have a grandmother. He apologized for taking his place. He then offered Moon-seong a bowl of dumpling soup, explaining that Ji-Soon had started her business with this very dish and built the hotel from its humble beginnings. She'd always dreamed of making a warm bowl of dumpling soup for her grandson. Touched, Moon-seong finally tried the soup, his aloof demeanor softening. Upon learning that Yoon-hee had played the role of Jae-hyun's wife, he teased her, saying she was even homelier than he and not nearly as pretty as his wife. Jae-hyun burst out laughing. After the meal, Yoon-hee encountered her sister-in-law. Without a word, her sister-in-law embraced her tightly. She wanted to be friends again. Yoon-hee, of course, felt the same. They exchanged numbers, and Yoon-hee reintroduced herself, properly this time. Laughing, they rekindled their former bond. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun took Moon-seong to the seashore, describing how Ji-Soon would often stand there, gazing out at the ocean, imagining her grandson returning home by boat. Moon-seong couldn't help but recall his own tearful goodbye with his grandmother years ago. Afterwards, Jae-hyun took Moon-seong to a bar for drinks. His initial plan was to get Moon-seong drunk But after just one glass, Jae-hyun found himself feeling tipsy. Moon-song quickly seized the opportunity to ask why Jae-hyun had impersonated him. Jae-hyun, after a moment of reflection, admitted he did it to make Ji-soon happy. And for himself, he confessed a longing to experience what it felt like to have a family that cared. In a moment of vulnerability, he admitted to envying Moon-seong for having parents, something he never had. Moon-song sighed, seeming to accept Jae-hyun's explanation. As they left, Moon-seong playfully helped the now inebriated Jae-hyun out of the bar. When Jae-hyun woke up, Moon-seong teased him about his low alcohol tolerance. A genuine bond had formed between them. The next day, Jae-hyun took Moon-seong to one final location, a bamboo forest he had once visited with Ji-soon. Ji-soon had confided in him that she'd always waited for Moon-seong and his father to return, but they never did. Recently, however, she'd come to realize that they must have been waiting for her too. This realization filled her with regret for Moon-song. Hearing this, Moon-song was visibly moved and asked to be left alone. Just then, the woman who had previously attacked Se-gyu at the bar reappeared. She grabbed his hair, but thankfully, restaurant staff intervened, allowing him to escape. Moon-song found the incident amusing. Spurred by the comical interruption, they began talking about Moon-seong's wife and marriage. Moon-seong didn't want to elaborate, and Se-gyu readily offered his assistance if needed. They shook hands, agreeing to help each other out. After her previous health scare, Ji-soon stabilized and called head manager Cheol, asking to be taken home. On the way, she weakly thanked him for staying by her side all these years. Hearing her frail voice, head manager Cheol fought back tears, sensing her time was drawing near. Back at home, Ji-soon looked at old photographs, recalling the day she received the news of her son's death, the gut-wrenching pain of losing a child. The memory was still vivid. When Jae-hyun received the news of Ji-soon's declining health, he immediately informed his friends that it was time for their final performance. Moon-song also received the news and went to Ji-soon's room. He confessed that he had once hated her. They had promised to meet again, but the promise remained unfulfilled. He had kept waiting for that day to come, but the waiting had been a constant ache. So he hated her, expressing his resentment with harsh words. He spoke of his father, who deeply missed Ji-soon and had tried desperately, but unsuccessfully, to reach South Korea. Ji-soon, with tears in her eyes, thanked Moon-song for coming to see her. His words broke through his hardened exterior, and he too began to weep. After their emotional exchange, Ji-soon requested to see all her grandchildren in the living room. She spoke words of love and gratitude to each of them, even to the eldest, who planned to sell the hotel she'd built with her own hands. In her final moments, she led them all to a special place. Ji-soon and Moon-seong rode together in the same car, his hand clasped tightly in hers, their shared grief bridging the gap between them. They arrived at a theater to witness Moon-song's farewell play. The performance beautifully depicts head manager Cheol's search for and hiring of Jae-hyun, as well as the poignant moments shared between Moon-song and Ji-soon, from the revelation of his true identity to his unwavering desire to be with her until the end. After the final curtain call, a spotlight shone on Ji-soon. She walked onto the stage, gently stroked Jae-hyun's hand, and embraced him tightly. With a peaceful smile, she passed away, her heart full of love and contentment. In the afterlife, Ji-soon reunited with her beloved husband. He praised her for a life well lived and guided her into the next realm. Back in the world of the living, the lawyer read Ji-soon's will. She left 10% of her assets to head manager Cheol and the housekeeper. The remainder was to be divided equally amongst the eldest brother, the second brother, Si-yeon, and Moon-seong. However, Moon-seong's share would be managed by head manager Cheol and the housekeeper until he obtained South Korean citizenship. This effectively blocked the eldest brother's plans to sell the hotel. Si-yeon loved the hotel. The eldest brother was driven by resentment. Love and hate, truly just a thin line apart. Whoever possessed the stronger resolve would win. Clearly, Si-yeon's motivation to protect the hotel burned brighter. Si-yeon met with Moon-song for drinks, urging him to stay in South Korea with his family. They were blood, after all, and that couldn't be changed. She'd always longed for a younger brother. Moon-song remained silent, simply sharing a drink with her. Head manager Cheol diligently worked on Moon-song's citizenship application. Soon, he would truly be a South Korean. After the farewell play, Jae-hyun continued working at the restaurant, while pursuing his passion for acting. And by his side? Se-gyu, who had joined his acting troupe. He'd bought a theater and was preparing to stage a major production with his troupe. After a long day, Se-gyu joined Jae-hyun for drinks. During their casual conversation, he mentioned Si-yeon's situation. Jae-hyun gazed into the distance, a wistful expression on his face. He'd missed her terribly. The following day, Si Yeon stared at her wedding invitations and sighed. Si Ju, seeing the invitations, was puzzled. Now that Si Yeon didn't need Dongji's shares to protect the hotel, there was no reason to go through with the loveless marriage. Si Yeon explained she had a point to prove to Dongji. Yoonhee was prepared to return to the US. She promised to stay in touch with her newfound friends, the daughter-in-law and head manager Cheol's wife. They would continue their outings, exploring new restaurants and visiting popular spots. Before leaving, Yoonhee met with Jae Hyun, asking him point-blank if he still loved Se-yeon. Jae Hyun nodded, admitting he would continue to pursue her, even if she only saw him as a younger brother. To his surprise, Yoonhee then confessed her own feelings for him. Jae Hyun was momentarily stunned, then gently patted her head. He loved her too, he explained, but as a sister. Despite his rejection, Yoonhee remained undeterred. She too would continue to pursue him. The eldest brother, unable to buy the hotel, ultimately respected Jimsoon's wishes. Finding newfound happiness with his family, he decided to travel abroad with his wife. Soon after, Dongji met with Se-yeon, ready to call off the wedding. Jae Hyun's words had resonated with him. He'd been too focused on righting the wrongs of the past. He sincerely apologized to Se-yeon and transferred all his shares to her. A genuine smile finally graced Se-yeon's face. Dongjae vowed to start over, to pursue her properly this time. Before Dongji could make his move, however, Jae Hyun invited Se-yeon to dinner. At a small restaurant, he remarked that love often begins with sharing a meal. Se-yeon simply smiled, picking up a piece of food and feeding it to him. Jae Hyun, finally free to be himself, could openly express his affection. Together, they would write their happy ending. Thank you for watching.